Welcome back to Beyond the Box Score. We are ranking play callers today. Which offensive minds are the most fantasy friendly in terms of designing and calling plays? We're going to discuss new hires such as David Blau with the Washington Commanders or Sean Mannion, evil genius, with the Philadelphia Eagles. Ryan's got some fun insight on that. I loved how you went and looked at each of the different hires and like the quotes from the coaches and players and everything. Getting excited maybe for Sean Mannion. Can also uncover a few hidden gems with Ryan, who we believe could be huge for fantasy purposes in 2026. So I do have my buddy Ryan Heath here to help me rank the play callers. This is a favorite offseason topic of ours, I think, for sure. I mean, I definitely for Ryan, he went so far as to write 22,000 words about it this year. This was super important last year. So like being early to the party on Klint Kubiak obviously helped identify Jackson Smith and Jigba as a league-winning pick. Being in early on Ben Johnson Bears, Liam Coen Jaguars was huge for fantasy, and definitely we're going to talk about those three a lot. Ryan and I have our eyes on those three for 2026. But we have some surprising names too, so I'm excited to get to that. We'll get to that in a moment. Ryan, I'm about to share our combined tier list. You and I each made tier lists. I want the listeners to know that we didn't discuss this beforehand. I didn't even read Ryan's article beforehand because I wanted to make my rankings and like have two original ideas and see what we found when we combined them. And Ryan, we landed on an identical S tier. Does that surprise you at all?
Not really. I mean, I think that's just the easiest place to find agreement is the guys that have succeeded a ton and should continue to, right? So I think that's where there's the most signal is at the extremes with this type of thing. So I'm glad that we had the same exact six guys apparently.
I was psyched that you had Brian Schottenheimer in there because I feel like people really sleep on Schotty and what has happened in Dallas. We'll get into that for sure. So the S tier is Kyle Shanahan, Ben Johnson, Sean McVay, Liam Coen, Mike McDaniel, and Brian Schottenheimer. My first question for you today, Ryan, is if you had to remove somebody from this S tier, who would it be?
Ooh, that's difficult. It is it's probably Schottenheimer just because we have only really 1 year of it. But what the year we got was so fantasy friendly. Just his use of kind of all the play calling hacks, the motion, the play action, while at the same time having such a high pass rate over expectation, such a strong pace of play was just so immediately impactful for all of the Cowboys fantasy players. But everybody else here has like multiple seasons of extremely high end efficiency in the S tier. So yeah, if I had to remove one, it's probably Schottenheimer, but I felt like he really deserved it.
Yeah, I have a tough time with any of that, but people online were saying this is too many. You can't have this many in the S tier. And I'm like, they are all so good. Like Schottenheimer was, I think, second in fantasy points among like all offenses last year, cumulative. And then like 2 years ago or 2023, it wasn't, I mean, he was the offensive coordinator. Mike McCarthy was there. I don't know exactly how much of that credit you give to him necessarily, but they were basically just as good, if not better, like they've been absolutely massive for fantasy purposes. And then, like you said, we're going to focus on this today during snap motion. So motion as the ball is snapped, pre-snap motion, all this stuff is really important. Ryan's got the research on that. You can find this all in Fantasy Points data. Like I said, he just put out an awesome article over there that you definitely need to check out. We'll spend some time talking about that today. Okay, so S tier, already laid out for you. We'll get into all the names. The A tier, I think maybe has some surprises here and is even bigger than the S tier. So we're blessed right now. I feel like we've got some really good offensive minds for fantasy, and it's important to draw the distinctions because, the D tier is empty here just because I didn't feel like uploading the images to fill it out. But there are some play callers in the D tier. There are some play callers in the C tier, not just the ones that we don't know about, just some other ones we do know about. And so like, I think really knowing which offenses we can hone in on for fantasy. And then particularly I'm interested in like which offenses are going to be very concentrated, which I think is an important distinction that we have to draw for some of these play callers. Like I'm really excited to get into Zach Robinson, who I was really excited to see that you had in your A tier as well. I don't think people would expect that, but we've got Klint Kubiak, Zach Robinson, Zach Taylor for the Bengals, Todd Monken going over to the Browns. I'm really, really curious to pick your brain about your expectations for the Browns. Kevin O'Connell, of course, needs to be in this discussion even after last year. And we're excited. Ryan, I know you are pretty high on Kyler Murray's potential as a late round QB. I'm excited to dig into that with you. We have Matt LaFleur, Kellen Moore with the Saints, and then the last one is Shane Steichen with the Colts. No Andy Reid. No Andy Reid. We did this exercise last year, me and Dan Schneier and Rich Rebar, and we had Andy Reid in the S tier, and he has fallen. You might notice I drew Petzing down to the B tier. Ryan had him in the A tier. I love to see that. I have been so high on Drew Petzing, Ryan, and I like never run into anybody who cares, let alone like would be higher than me on him. It's like I know Nate Tice and Matt Harbin over at Yahoo really respect his work, but basically nobody cares. And so to see you actually have him ahead of me was really, really exciting. So a lot to dig into. Let's start with the S tier. Anything you want to share on any of these? I've got my own notes, but it's Shanahan, Ben Johnson. Where do you want to start here?
I mean, why don't we start with Liam Coen? I feel like we give plenty of love to Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay. We just name the coaching tree after those two guys. So let's like go into the other ones because I think hopefully at this point everyone understands that Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay create efficient offense. But yeah, I think if anyone maybe other than Schottenheimer is still underrated in the S tier, it is Liam Coen. He is just amazing for fantasy is the conclusion that I've come to. So if you just rank every active play caller by quarterback fantasy points per game over the past 5 seasons, it's Joe Brady number 1, which makes sense, has Josh Allen. Liam Coen number 2, who has just had Baker Mayfield and Trevor Lawrence. The next 3 guys on the list are Todd Monken, of course, Lamar Jackson, Zach Taylor, of course, with Joe Burrow, and Andy Reid, of course, with Patrick Mahomes. So that list is just all the superstar quarterbacks in the NFL and the guys that happen to be their play callers, plus Liam Coen and Baker Mayfield and Trevor Lawrence, 2 guys who were very much considered mid-tier or worse in most NFL circles before Coen got his hands on them. So that is just one really fun Liam Coen stat. He ranks 7th in total backfield expected fantasy points per game over the past 3 seasons. That's especially impressive because he does not run a particularly run-heavy offense. He is above the league median in dropbacks per game over the past 2 seasons, but he still has one of the top 7 most valuable backfields, mostly because of how he uses his running backs in the passing game on design screens, especially around the red zone, and just because he's run efficient offenses that get into the red zone a lot, that create these higher value fantasy touches for his running backs. So kind of just all around, any angle you look at it from, Liam Coen is one of the most fantasy friendly play callers in the game right now. And the only tricky thing for fantasy is really choosing which of his wide receivers are you drafting, because I think we're pretty sure that Trevor Lawrence benefits from all this, right? There are some Chris Rodriguez fans for sure, but at least until Rodriguez gets on the field, it seems like Bashal Tutin is the assumed starter for the Jaguars at running back. So we've got like an idea of where the volume's going in those 2 places. But yeah, it really is just picking between the Jaguars wide receivers, I think could end up being one of the more consequential fantasy decisions you make this year, just because it's fairly ambiguous. We could have Travis Hunter come in and kind of ruin all of these guys' route shares potentially and just ruin the party in terms of route volume for them all. But I expect the per route efficiency overall for all of these players to be really strong. It's just really comes down to which one do you pick.
For sure. The chat is here showing love to Ryan. They say you're S tier, Ryan. You love to see that. People have really loved this article. I think your takeaway here with the Jags being maybe the most important, or definitely one of the most important offenses, makes a lot of sense because we know how good it can be. That 2024 Bucks offense was like one of the just most prolific fantasy juggernauts that we've had. And then right away, 9th in fantasy points in his first year as a head coach. Like I said, Rich and Dan and I did this last year, and we were a little hesitant to crown Ben Johnson and Liam Coen after just, what we'd seen from them as offensive coordinators, because I think taking over head coaching duties is a whole other thing. That's kind of why I've got Klint Kubiak in A tier, even though we've been really excited about Kubiak and his work for several years now. Is because I want to see him do it. We saw Coen do it, even with some of the, Some of the stuff that needed to be cleaned up early on in the season, they did get better in terms of like getting the play call in quickly and stuff, and a lot of penalties early in the year. And the overall result was really, really good, especially down the stretch when we saw them go pass heavy and just be really, really just, I mean, league winning type stuff for fantasy all across the board. Um, the question about the pass catchers, though, remains really, really interesting. I'm curious if there's anything you landed on specifically. I know you've dug into like the horizontally breaking routes, for example, being something that really boosts efficiency. We've talked about. I'm going to throw this up on the screen real quick. So I shared all of this. This is like you can see the fantasy points for the past 3 years over on the left side for play callers, and then all of the cheat code type stuff that Ryan has researched. I've all got compiled in this one sheet, and Liam Coen just shows up pretty consistently high in all of it. Love all the motion at the snap, and specifically the way he uses it to create misdirection and create space for players, whether that be Travis Etienne, getting easy, Bashal Tune getting easy wide open screens for touchdowns. Parker Washington getting all the motion at the snap to help him not have to deal with press coverage so much. So I'm curious, with all that you've dug into, if there's anybody that you landed on, or you just kind of like get as many of these as you can, as many shots as you can. I know you really like the slot receiver stuff for Liam Coen. So is it Parker Washington? I actually am kind of landing on Jacoby Myers as my answer, which is weird.
I will say, I think Myers is the answer in best ball, where you really just want to avoid zeros and you just want a player that's going to be on the field as much as possible to kind of navigate you through that format where there's no waiver wire and there's no safety in that sense that you can fall back on. Myers makes a ton of sense to me in terms of, I think he probably just leads this team in routes run. That's kind of what we've seen. That's what we saw from him last year with every configuration of this receiving room. It's kind of what we've just seen everywhere that he goes. So that I am with you in that sense. From an upside sense, I'm in on Parker Washington as my receiver of choice, just because, we saw him just be completely amazing in this slot role with Liam Coen last year. We have seen everyone from Wan'Dale Robinson at Kentucky to Cooper Kupp having his record-breaking season in 2022, Chris Godwin averaging nearly 20 fantasy points per game in 2024 in the slot with Liam Coen. And then, Parker Washington in his 8 healthy post-bye games, over 17 fantasy points per game last year in this role. So that's like the highest upside thing here that I've kind of identified that I want to chase. I will be very clear that I think Washington, maybe more than anyone, is in danger of the Travis Hunter effect. Just of if Hunter is getting a decent share of routes on offense because they're committed to playing him 2 ways, then Washington's the most likely to come off the field, I'd say. I think it will be kind of all of them rotating, but Washington from the slot, it just would make the most sense to me to come off the field some. So there's a risk there, 100%. There is like a 40 to 50% chance that Washington is not like a startable fantasy receiver in managed leagues this year. I just don't care about that when I'm talking about like a 7th, 8th, 9th round pick on a lot of these, especially home league platforms. Just because the cost of missing on a wide receiver at that point in your typical managed redraft league is very low. A lot of picks don't work out there. You can always, supplement your floor with the waiver wire there. I draft for upside in that format. So that's really where I focus on Parker Washington. Brian Thomas Jr., to me, we just saw his role and his route tree get much worse, both from his rookie season and as the year went on, after he kind of transitioned from this more in-breaking over the middle of the field role to much more of just a downfield, go ball, field stretcher type of receiver after they acquired Jacoby Myers, after Parker Washington became a full-time player. So I tend to think that what worked for a team, which for the Jaguars was what they were doing at the end of last year, is what's kind of most likely to carry forward in terms of the receiver roles. So that's kind of where I see Brian Thomas Jr. as not an amazing bet, but like, hey, he could prove me wrong. The guy was one of the most productive rookie seasons we've ever seen over the second half of that year. Like, I think he's a really good player. If he gets deployed in a fantasy friendly way, he could totally be the one to kind of break fantasy football from this offense. But yeah, Parker Washington is my preferred bet, specifically for managed leagues.
All right. Yeah, I think it's important to let people know that it could, like, you said 30, 40% chance, something like that he really might not be playing enough to even matter for fantasy. Like, definitely could be a bust. I think he's one of the riskiest picks among the picks you can make in the first 6, 7, 8 rounds or whatever. But the upside is very clear. We saw it at the end of last year. And I can't help but do this every time you and I talk about the Jags. I want to just real quick mention that Britton Strange exists. I think a lot of people forget that. And he's pretty good. And just the reason I'm bringing this up is because I dug into this. Lord Reeves is where I found this. I'll give the fifth Rich Rebar mention in the first 15 minutes of the episode, but it's crazy. So Reeves found that the tight end one of fantasy in each of the past 5 seasons has led the position in routes run. And so I dug into it a little bit more. And dating back to 2013, the league leader at the position in routes run has been tight end 1 at best or tight end 4 at worst every single time. With a 100%, so that's 100% finish in the top 5, 77% finish in the top 3, and a 54% chance of landing tight end 1 overall just by knowing which tight end will run the most routes in the league. And it's not just exclusive to running the most routes, but if you at least run 500 routes, which I think is very realistic with Strange plays the whole year. We'll see. They did draft 2 tight ends. Like, maybe things changes and he's not like a full-time player or something here. But if this offense goes really pass heavy, he's just completely overlooked. And I think he's just going to walk into points. And he has a little bit of continued upside if any of these pieces around him get hurt, if Parker Washington gets hurt or whatever. So he's just somebody who nobody cares about. And I do. I think he's actually really good with the ball in his hands, and is a little bit underrated as a route runner. Not that big of a deal at tight end, but he's a really good mover. Okay. We're going to wrap there on our Liam Coen discussion. We're going to take our first break and get back and talk about Ben Johnson.
You need a hug? You need a fist? Crutch, crutch, crutch.
Crutch, crutch.
Crutch, you need anything?
I do have one question.
We didn't mean right now.
Okay, Ben Johnson, I had just behind Kyle Shanahan. This is how I ranked them. Do you think that is ridiculous? Do you think that that's blasphemy for me to put him ahead of Sean McVay?
Man, it's not a question I've ever given thought to in terms of how you order like these top guys specifically. Yeah. I think I would still take McVay personally. I just give McVay a lot of credit for very much being like at the forefront of the NFL meta in a lot of different ways by himself. Like we've seen everything with McVay from 11 personnel and running out of that because defenses play lighter against it, to last year throwing out of heavy personnel. Like, I feel like he's much more of a trailblazer doing these like new things that everyone in the league wants to copy. And I see Johnson as he's very effective in doing so, but I think he's a little bit more of like a trend follower. Like he does it just as well or better than most coaches, don't get me wrong. I don't know that I see like the completely new ideas from Ben Johnson. Maybe outside of like fourth down aggressiveness, stuff like that, I give him a lot more credit than really any coach in the McShanahan tree. I think that's kind of a blind spot for them. But yeah, I don't know that Johnson is like a trailblazer in his own right. I think he gets a lot from Sean Payton, from Dan Campbell even. So I would put McVay ahead of him, but he's clearly top 3 for me.
Hat tip to McVay. He's very cool. I want fantasy points as opposed to novelty. I agree with what you're saying. But Ben Johnson's 24 Lions is by far the best mark in terms of fantasy points over the past 3 years. It's better than any Shanahan team. The only teams on a per game basis that have scored more fantasy points among like the whole team than the Lions. No, this is non-quarterback fantasy points. Sorry. That's what I always look at just because some of these get out of control with Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, etc. But the only teams that had more on a per game basis over the past 20 years are like a couple of Drew Brees, Sean Payton teams, Mahomes in 2018, some Tom Brady teams, and the Peyton Manning Broncos team from 2013. So it's the 9th highest per game score of the past 2 decades and the highest since 2016. And so he was there for 3 years, got better every single year. and culminated in this historic year. And then his first years with the Bears, with a bunch of young players combining for a freaking 58% completion percentage between off-target throws and league-leading drops, he finishes 9th in non-quarterback fantasy points. Like, his year one is right up there with the best seasons from Matt LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell over the past few years. And I think there's just been results everywhere he's gone. And maybe some of that was Dan Campbell. I don't really know. But the results have been great everywhere he's gone.
Yeah.
And, he has the guy that Sean McVay moved on from to go get Stafford, and he put up just as good of numbers with Jared Goff. And then he goes with Caleb Williams in year 2 and puts up like those types of numbers right away. Like, I can't say enough about him. Like, him and Shanahan are the only two over the past 3 years who have been top 10 in non-quarterback fantasy points every single year. So I think he's the man. And I think he does a great job of maximizing his players. He does all the things that we like. And he's a sicko, man. He's a complete sicko. You say that like he kind of copies, and it's like, yeah, because he's freaking obsessed with football. He's insanely obsessed with football. He's the only guy really from this S tier that's like not from the McShanahan tree. He just like has taken everything. He just like absorbs everything and gives us like peak football. And it's like, yeah, hell yeah, that's awesome. I was listening to The Athletic, and they were talking about like the Ryan Pagnetti stuff. I think I've got this up here somewhere. Gosh dang it. It's how he's just making everything look like 50-50. On 2nd and 1, he's passing at the highest rate by far, 48%. And then on like 2nd and 3rd and long, he's running, like he's doing stuff to just throw people off. And then the other thing they brought up that cracked me up from that podcast is somebody asked Ben Johnson, what are you going to do during your break between OTAs and training camp? And he goes, study the Dolphins run game. like study what Mike McDaniel was doing last year in Miami. Like, that's no cool, man. He's my goat. I don't care.
Yeah, he's great. To be entirely clear, like I am not a Ben Johnson hater whatsoever. Yeah. Everything you just said about him is well said. He on 2nd and 1, 2nd and 2, he has one of the highest shot play rates. So taking a deep shot downfield is just by EPA per play one of the best things you can do in any football situation is to throw downfield on 2nd and short. You just treat it as a free shot, because on 3rd and short, you can run for positive EPA anyway and convert the first down at something like a 70% rate. So you treat that 2nd and short as a free play on which the defense is more likely to be defending the run, especially if you're effectively mixing play action into your offense. Then yeah, it's just amazing. It's a efficiency printer. So yeah, not to downplay Ben Johnson or how great he is at all. Honestly, when it comes to aligning with some of those analytical trends, like when to pass, when to run, situational football, I think there's nobody that's better right now. Those are some of the bigger criticisms that you could make about a Shanahan or a McVay at different points in their career. So yeah, Ben Johnson's awesome. I guess I just felt the need to expound on that more after I was like, oh man, I don't want to sound like I'm the low guy on Ben Johnson on this podcast. I can't do that. Yeah.
No. I love it. I love the 2nd and shot stuff. That's literally how I've always played Madden. It makes so much sense to me, but like I don't know, like he's like way above the rest of the league in doing it, but it makes so much sense, especially if you're going to go for it on 4th down anyway. Like, yeah, take that shot. And that's what he's all about, like creating explosives. And yeah, the results speak for themselves. Do you have anything on the Bears you want to add on the players specifically before we move on here? You can always tell people to go read your article that you put months and months of work into.
No, honestly, like the Bears were kind of an exclusion from my article. I barely talked about the Bears at all, just because I guess I and hopefully the reader are taking it for granted. Like, yeah, the Bears under Ben Johnson can be really good and really efficient. I guess the biggest thing with the Bears to me, outside of like personnel related stuff, who's going to be on the field in heavy personnel that we've talked about ad nauseum through this offseason, is I think DeAndre Swift as a fantasy asset is getting legit underrated right now. It was more of a 60-40 split between him and Kyle Monangai for most of last season, with Swift kind of leaning toward the more valuable fantasy touches in the red zone. If this offense is just going to be a top 3 offense in the league, Yeah, I want a 60% share of that offense where I'm getting most of the red zone stuff. Within that 60% share, that sounds awesome. That sounds like a potential borderline RB1. Like, I think that's the type of bet that hit last year with a Travis Etienne, with a Javonte Williams. But right now you can just get DeAndre Swift multiple rounds after those guys go. And I don't think there's like a huge talent gap between a Swift and a Javonte Williams or a Swift and a Travis Etienne. So that's just like an ADP that doesn't make a ton of sense to me comparatively to some of those guys in like round 3, round 4 that I've been calling the new running back dead zone. Swift, it has like a dead zone profile, but he goes multiple rounds after it. So he's just like a great pick is what I see.
That's exactly where I was going to go with it with Swift. I think the pass catchers are the easy thing to fixate on, but I think Swift is completely overlooked. We're going to have a league-winning running back show with Theo Grimminger on Friday, and Swift is one of my picks. And so we got a question from the chat here. Is Swift more of an ADP beater versus an upside guy? No, I think he legitimately does have upside. One, just through touchdowns, touchdowns and explosive plays, both of which are, capabilities in this offense, the way that Ben Johnson sets things up, and just like his skill set as somebody who can rip off explosive plays. Either of those could come. He could just get there through variance, through the team being better than expected and him scoring touchdowns. Also, Kyle Monangai, I've said this multiple times in the podcast, Kyle Monangai runs like a crazy person. If Monangai gets hurt and Swift gets the whole backfield to himself, that's it. That's like a top 8 running back in fantasy in this offense. That's all it takes. I think that's very realistic that like he could give you upside and you don't necessarily need him to. I do think he's probably just a win either way at his ADP, even if things don't break, 90th percentile for him. I think he's probably just a good pick. All right. I want to move the discussion to Mike McDaniel because I think we're just starting with kind of the obvious ones here, but I also do think that they're extremely important. I think Mike McDaniel and the Chargers are, everything that you want, like literally everything that you want. I think Justin Herbert is the league-winning quarterback pick. I think Ladd McConkey is set up extremely well. We just did this episode, did this with Dan, live show yesterday. Does your quarterback pass the middle of the field test? And so it kind of presents as a, football guy episode. But all of the sicko stuff that you like, all of the fantasy stuff that you like comes through here where it's like just tons of Ladd McConkey hype. I really think that the pairing here with McDaniel is perfect because if you look at like the league leaders during McDaniel's time in yards and fantasy points produced on throws over the like intermediate deep middle area of the field, it's Tyreek number 1, then Justin Jefferson, and then Jalen Waddle number 3. And that's where McConkey freaking cooked as a rookie. He had 46% of Justin Herbert's targets on those throws as a rookie. And then last year, they were just getting sacked before they could throw to the intermediate deep middle area of the field. Like, I really think that he set up fantastic. Obviously, Amari Hampton is like, people get excited about what McDaniel could do for Herbert and everything, but really like where he's at his best, the whole reason I gave you the Ben Johnson anecdote earlier is he's going to go study Mike McDaniel's run game. Like, this could be so huge for Hampton. I think the people who are taking shots on Keith Mitchell could absolutely be right. Like, there's so many ways that this could go well, I think. And I want to have a lot of exposure to it. The offensive line is going to be so much better as long as it's healthy. And this could just be the best offense in the NFL. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Talk to me about what you found with Mike McDaniel.
Yeah, I mean, you gave a great overview there, but just to hype the guy up a little more, when it comes to our 2 biggest efficiency hacks, play action drop back rate and motion at the snap during snap motion rate, Mike McDaniel is just like top right of that chart, like leading the way in both of those stats. And those things just lead to efficient offense and efficient fantasy scoring, full stop. So that's like we have a mechanism here that we can say, okay, this is going to translate over to another team, hopefully with easily the best quarterback that he has ever had the pleasure of working with. So I'm also extremely excited about the Chargers. Justin Herbert, even last year with Greg Roman, but like without the insane level of like just play calling eliteness that McDaniel brings, in 4 games with a healthy Joe Alt, he averaged over 22 fantasy points per game. His .44 EPA per dropback would have led every quarterback over any of the past 5 seasons in that split. So this offense is already built for Herbert to be a superstar fantasy quarterback. And I just think you're ratcheting up the efficiency. You're getting Alt and Rashawn Slater back this year. Like, I fully agree. Like, this could just be the best offense in the NFL. Justin Herbert could just lead the NFL in passing touchdowns. That's kind of my expectation, honestly, as absurdly high an expectation as that is. So that's like the angle I'm approaching this from in fantasy. We've talked a ton about Ladd McConkey on this show. I feel like everyone else at Fantasy Points has turned on Ladd McConkey. I'm just a guy that's still stuck here on an island believing in Ladd McConkey. But he is just awesome. We saw it in his rookie season that he can just score as a low-end fantasy wide receiver one over the second half of his rookie year. He was amazing on all of the downfield go route stuff that you just mentioned. A lot of that's going to overlap with the intermediate deep areas. But over the past 4 seasons, Ladd McConkey ranks 4th in yards per out run on go routes, just ahead of Tyreek Hill. So that's like another fun and easy comparison to make. As absurd as that sounds, Daniel Popper in The Athletic has made the same comparison of Ladd McConkey to Tyreek Hill, doing these similar things downfield as he was able to. So yeah, I'm all in on Ladd McConkey as well. And yeah, I think maybe Hampton is the most interesting point of discussion, just because everyone is like inventing reasons to be out on Omarion Hampton is kind of what's happening from my perspective. There's Keaton Mitchell. There's Hampton's yards per carry being bad in outside zone, which is like the run scheme that Mike McDaniel overwhelmingly runs. There's just like kind of all of these nitpicks that people are making that are related to McDaniel, right? He put up the wanted poster of Keaton Mitchell and all of that. But I just reject the idea that it's actually bad for the starting running back on a team that gets Mike McDaniel, who's averages over 25 backfield expected fantasy points per game over the past 5 seasons. That's 6th best. He has literally had 2 fantasy RB1s in the same backfield, had Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert averaging over 17 fantasy points per game each in Achane's rookie season. Like, even if there is like a little bit of a split with Keaton Mitchell, that does not mean that Omarion Hampton can't be a top 5 or a top 3 fantasy running back whatsoever. Like, there is so much volume and fantasy value to be had in a Mike McDaniel backfield that I just can't get behind the idea that Keaton Mitchell, as a tiny running back that is great on the 4 to 5 like gadget screen touches, trick plays per game, is like a reason that I should be out on Omarion Hampton. That's just ridiculous to me. Like, for any other running back, the backup being a tiny guy, like way even smaller than Devon Achane was coming out, like Tariq Coen size, is the only guy you can even compare him to that's ever been fantasy relevant. That guy is like the reason we should be out on Omarion Hampton. I just reject that completely. Keaton Mitchell has also not been good on outside zone over his career. Yeah. Also, these are all that's the thing no one talks about. It's like, okay, if Hampton's not a scheme fit, is Keaton Mitchell, who averages 3.8 yards per carry on outside zone, is gonna be the outside zone guy? Like, what are we talking about here? None of these running backs have more than a 36 carry sample on outside zone in their NFL careers. Like, why are we talking about yards per carry and rushing efficiency in these splits? That's like absurd. We would never accept this for any other point ever. But this has like just carried through the fantasy football ether. So I remain super in on Omarion Hampton in round 2. I agree that 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, before the fantasy market kind of became more attuned to upside and willing to kind of buy this type of case for a player, yeah, you probably could have gotten Hampton in round 3, round 4 in past seasons. That doesn't mean that he's not also a good pick in the beginning or middle of round 2 this year. Like, I agree. I wish he was cheaper, and in years past we've gotten more of a discount on a rookie season where he was injured for half of it, but that's not the world we live in anymore, and we still have to like play to the ADP we're given. And I think in this case, Omarion Hampton's still a great pick where he's going.
For sure. Ryan, I say this lovingly, I do wonder if maybe you've become a little bit too online if you are like getting into a position where you feel like you need to defend the validity of the very specific, splits on outside zone runs for Amari Hampton versus Keaton Mitchell to like 10 people who are online harassing you about that. Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. Amari Hampton's awesome. He's really big, really
Yes.
fast. He produced pretty well last year when he was healthy, even though the line was terrible. I feel pretty comfortable taking this guy, pretty early in drafts. I think there's massive upside. If you want a more detailed breakdown, Dan and I dug into the schematic fit. We watched him in college. We watched him as a rookie, even though the film as a rookie was claw your eyes out brutal because of the offensive line play. We still watched it. We have takes. I've got a profile here. We've got profiles out on all these interesting rookies. Ashton Genty, we're going to talk about Klint Kubiak soon. Facial Tude, and we already talked about Liam Coen. All this stuff is relevant, and we've got more detailed takes for you. But sometimes it's just simple, like that's the whole ethos of this episode, right? Take good players on good offenses, win in fantasy football. I think that Amari Hampton epitomizes that. Okay, real quick, we're going to wrap up the S tier with Brian Schottenheimer. We're going to hit our second break. What I've got on Shotty, second in fantasy points as an offense of 2025, extremely concentrated. Wide receiver 5, wide receiver 11 per game in fantasy, QB 6, tight end 5, running back 12. Just an absolute print shop last year. The offensive line looks great. I love everything that Schottenheimer did in terms of the under the hood stuff. I think he's taking elements. He's kind of like Ben Johnson a little bit, where he's taking elements from a lot of different places. I really like the direction of their young coaching staff. I feel really good about all of this going forward. Did you have anything specifically that you wanted to add on Schottenheimer or any Dallas takes?
Yeah, not particularly. I think you just did a good job there. So yeah, not a ton on Shoddy other than what I said earlier. Is just it's an awesome offense. There's not a whole lot like changing here that I think is like shifting pieces that we need to analyze.
All right, good stuff. We're gonna hit our second break, and then Ryan and I are gonna get back and tell you about our two. I think two. Maybe you have more. Two that I've seen for sure. Kind of sleeper picks in terms of these play callers, play designers. I think people have written off and could like truly have massive seasons in 2026.
When you need your sports news all the time,
We've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ hits every highlight from all the sports that matter to you.
JJ, we appreciate your time breaking it down.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With the plays you missed
What a finish at the final round of play.
and analysis to give you an edge.
All we need is 20 points.
I was shaking in my boots.
Texas, Ohio State. Who wins this game?
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, streaming free 24/7.
Alrighty, Zach Robinson in the A tier. I just want to talk about it because I did this last year. I think we had him in C or B, and maybe even D. But we were a little bit more strict with. I think D was still some exciting names. I think Klint Kubiak and Zach Robinson were basically in the same range, and I was like, there's a lot of interesting stuff about Zach Robinson, but we've only seen it for a couple of years. I just don't really know what to make of it yet. And then he goes and gets fired basically, and now he's in the A tier. So how does that make any sense? I want to talk about it. Ryan and I have dug into this a lot. I've got a lot of notes. Let me just run through the players specifically, and then you can talk about the motion and some of the more granular stuff. So really simply, this offense has been extremely concentrated, and even with poor quarterback play, we've gotten massive results for fantasy since Zach Robinson went to Atlanta. So Drake London, 10 plus targets in 13 games over the past 2 seasons, 13 different instances of having double-digit targets, ties him with Amon-Ra St. Brown, behind only Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith-Njigba, CeeDee Lamb, and Jamar Chase. So just feeding massive volume to the wide receiver 1. He has 4 games with 15 or more targets during that time, which is tied again with Sun God for second, behind only Jamar Chase. That's where Drake London has been in terms of just these games where he can get just massive volume, and that's with him missing some games. Bijan is tied with Jamar for the most games of 25 or more PPR points over the past 2 seasons, leading the league, tied with Jamar Chase in PPR points with 11 of those games. He had 32 plays last year of 15 or more yards, explosive plays at the running back position. That was just too short of Devon Achane for the most from a running back since the NFL has moved to 17 games, most in a season, 32 of these explosive plays. Of those 32, 16 came as a pass catcher. That's the most since Austin Eckler in 2019. Robinson completely unlocked Bijan in this way as a pass catcher, often using him out wide in the slot. He's shown an ability to like really, really, really hone in his offense on the best players and maximize them. I brought up the 25 plus point games. He's also Bijan is tied with Jamar with 5 games of 30 plus PPR points, only behind Saquon Barkley, JT, and Jahmyr Gibbs. These guys who have crazy speed to just rip off massive plays. And of course, those are more likely to give you these huge games. Bijan is really good. He gets lots of explosive plays. He doesn't really have that type of speed, but still we've seen him with, matching Jamar Chase for 30 plus point PPR games. And we've seen it from the other players too, not just him. Kyle Pitts had a freaking 40 plus PPR point game under Zach Robinson. There's only been 7 tight ends to hit that, dating back to 2000. One of them's Kyle Pitts. Like, this offense has just printed fantasy points. And I think there's a lot of underlying reasons as to why. And seeing you put him also in the A tier, I believe that you've got them. So talk us through it, Ryan.
Yeah, I want to say if I were ranking like real life play callers, Robinson would be significantly lower. But yeah. I do just think for all the just results and evidence you laid out, I think specifically for fantasy, he's someone we really need to pay attention to. But yeah, kind of the underlying mechanism around a lot of what you just said, I think is his use of motion at the snap, his during snap motion rate. Ranks second behind only Mike McDaniel in motion at the snap over the past 5 seasons. He's used it on 35% of his dropbacks. For perspective, that is double the rate that the Buccaneers did it last year. And yeah, we see about a 40% increase in fantasy points per route run with motion at the snap. Just the leaders in receiving yards on these plays with motion at the snap at all positions were number 1, Kyle Pitts, number 2, Bijan Robinson, number 3, Drake London. Just like pretty absurd results there, right? Clearly it's working to get the ball into the hands of his most talented players. So that's something we love in fantasy football. And it leaves us in a pretty interesting spot with this Buccaneers offense that has been among the best in the league and extremely mediocre at different points, right? Last year, they run into a ton of injuries with Baker Mayfield, specifically like after week 6, week 7, he had an oblique injury, as well as we just found out he was playing through a PCL injury since like week 2 or week 3. Their offensive line was extremely beat up all of last season. But if you just take a split of 2024 plus the first 6 games of 2025 before the injuries really started to rack up, Mike Evans went out, all of that. Baker Mayfield is the overall fantasy QB2 in that split over the past 2 seasons. Only Josh Allen scored more fantasy points over the past 2 years than Mayfield pre all of those injuries. So you add that to the fantasy friendliness of Robinson's motion at the snap, where Mayfield has averaged 50% more adjusted net yards per attempt with motion at the snap last year. That's the second biggest increase of any quarterback. And I start to get pretty excited because, yes, while overall the Falcons' offenses were not great with Robinson, they were often extremely run heavy as well. Just to whatever extent you're willing to pin that on a old Kirk Cousins, on a Michael Penix, and say, yeah, I think Baker Mayfield could just allow this team to be more balanced or more leaning pass heavy with all of this efficiency in just getting the ball to the biggest playmakers and nobody else. Yeah, you start to paint the picture of this Buccaneers offense could be a huge difference maker. So I think Emeka Egbuka is really interesting, obviously, just for a lot of outside reasons. Year 2 player. He had the 3rd most fantasy points over his first 5 weeks before injuring his hamstring of any wide receiver since the Berlin Wall fell. Only Randy Moss and Puka Nacua rank ahead of him. So that's like a pretty fun upside case, right? Chris Godwin, specifically when the Buccaneers have used motion at the snap, ranks 3rd in yards per out run over the past 2 seasons, behind only Puka and Nico Collins. Even last year when he was playing injured, he averaged over 4 yards per out run when the team used motion at the snap. And remember, that's the thing I just said, that Robinson has done twice as much as the Buccaneers did last year. So he's even really interesting as like a kind of post-injury, like older veteran type of sleeper, where the last time we saw him healthy on a football field, he was doing what I mentioned in the Liam Coen offense, averaging nearly 20 fantasy points per game. And now we get him 2 years removed from that really gruesome injury. If he's just back to 80 or 90% of his former self, this could be like a really high volume fantasy friendly option that could just get fed the ball over and over. So, and he's extremely cheap. So yeah, I'm just really intrigued by this passing game, kind of counterintuitively given how run heavy Robinson has been. But for me, I'm just willing to look at that and say, yeah, he had Bijan Robinson and Michael Penix. I understand why he was run heavy. Maybe we don't need to just assume that transfers over to the Buccaneers. So I'm pretty bullish just on this passing game. I think it's not totally clear, like, which of Egbuka or Godwin is a better pick, or Mayfield, or like what the best way to attack it in fantasy is. But I do think there's just a lot of upside here for just a fantasy football difference maker to emerge somewhere.
For sure. Yep. Again, I'll just throw this up on the screen. During snap motion is what we're focused on here. It's very important. We've talked about pre-snap motion for years and years and years. We now have even more specific data on which teams are doing this during snap motion stuff. And Ryan, I've got it up on the screen here. It's shown to really, really boost efficiency. It's over here on the right, plus 43% increase the fantasy points per route run. And if you look over the past couple of years, which play callers have been top 10 in this each of the past 2 seasons, it's all the best ones. It's Mike McDaniel, it's Ben Johnson, Liam Coen, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, and then Zach Robinson. First last year, and the percentage of these dropbacks that use this. He's been top 10 each of the past 2 seasons. There's one name that I didn't mention that's also top 10 in both of those years in motion at the snap, and it's Todd Monken. And I feel like you have all sorts of crazy charts with Todd Monken in the top left or right. And so take this any direction you want, because I haven't thought about it too much. You know, I've dug into it a little bit with the Browns, but at the end of the day, I'm just so averse to exposing myself to the quarterback situation that I don't even know if it matters how much Monken has boosted things. But I do want to point out this, like the underlying stuff, play action, motion to snap, that stuff is there with Monken. It's not just that he's benefiting from playing with Lamar Jackson. Like, he elevated what Lamar Jackson was doing, and I think it has a lot to do with this kind of a stuff. The run game has been really good too. So where are you at with Monken and the Browns?
Yeah, and it's not just Lamar Jackson either that Monken succeeded with. Back-to-back natties at Georgia. His Buccaneers averaged over 320 passing yards per game in 2018. That's a top 5 mark of all time in the NFL. This guy succeeded everywhere with lots of different personnel. So I think, yeah, you really do need to take Monken seriously as a play caller who can just elevate the fantasy prospects of the players on his team. Of course, this is maybe the most extreme test that he's ever going to get with this Browns roster, with Deshaun Watson as the assumed starter. So I get being hesitant, and I am in some cases for their players that are going like in the middle rounds, but I do think there is a real world where the Browns are at least like surprisingly competent this year, whether they do it through dropping back a ton because they're constantly losing and they just put enough drop back volume to kind of stuff the box scores to a respectable degree. Or yeah, if Monken just pulls some crazy new things out of his play call sheet and creates just a genuinely efficient offense out of all these lemons. So you've got to consider it. I think the best way to kind of attack that in fantasy is just by drafting Casey Concepcion, because he's one of the cheapest. He is a pretty strong round 1 wide receiver prospect that everybody, including Monken and Andrew Berry, have compared to Zay Flowers, who just had a ton of success under Monken. I really like Concepcion as a prospect. All of my film people that I listen to a ton pretty much really liked Casey Concepcion as a prospect. And this offense is just surprisingly competent. I think he's the best bet to, especially over the second half of the season, kind of return that like fantasy football difference making type of year. You can bet on a Quinshon Judkins or on a Harold Fannin. I also think those guys are talented players. But with Judkins, it's just really hard for me to buy into what's more than likely a 2-down running back on a team with a low win total. I don't know that the drop back heavy playing from behind type of game script really benefits Judkins. We have seen generally Monken uses a separate like early down runner and a pass catching running back. They've never been the same guy in any of his backfields really. Dylan Sampson slots in pretty convincingly to me there as that pass catching back. So I just game script related reasons keep me off of Judkins in the mid rounds. Fannin, I think there's probably a better case for. I am no longer worried about like, will he be on the field enough? The Browns just don't have an inline tight end that matters that's going to steal snaps from him. So he will be on the field. He will be running routes. And I just think the only reason to not be in on Fannin is it just if you like a Sam Laporta or a Tucker Kraft better, like on these teams that have double-digit win totals and much higher implied point totals, and that you don't have to galaxy brain the play caller angle for to convince yourself that it'll be an efficient offense. So I think Fannin, there's reasons to prefer other tight ends around him, but like extremely talented player. Monken coached Brock Bowers at Georgia. Like there's plenty of tight end success in his history. So I'm not going to be too mad at anybody that wants to buy into Fannin for this. But yeah, I really just think that the cheaper Concepcion is like the best of both worlds, like the lowest risk, but still pretty high upside potential avenue to bet on the Browns being surprisingly good. Again,
I'll just point towards that research I did on the route, the importance of running routes at the tight end position. I think that Fannin is a prime candidate to potentially push up into that 500 plus route range if they are playing from behind all the time, which is the expectation. The only hesitation I have is like if the offense is historically bad, if the line is a huge problem, if the quarterback is a huge problem, then they just can't convert first downs enough for it to really culminate in this kind of a route total. But I think there's plenty of outcomes where that happens. And you said like make something out of lemons. I do think there's two guys who aren't in this offense potentially, and that's him and Concepcion. I think we know Fannin is really good. Dan and I think Concepcion could be very good. We got 30 minutes on him right here. If you want to check out the like pre-draft profiles we did, we both thought that Concepcion had a real chance to be the best receiver in this class. So I'm very excited about the fit here with Monken. You brought up the Zay Flowers comparisons. I think that's apt, and it could be a sneaky big year one if they are able to create a lot of pass volume. And then, got profiles on Judkins and Fannin as well. A lot to think about with each of them. I think I'm basically with you, where Concepcion is probably the one who I'll have the most exposure to because he's so cheap. And I think I might end up with some Fannin, but I'm not so sure. I wanted to mention another episode I did here is this. It kind of gets buried with all these player profiles, but I dug into the best scramblers in the NFL, and just you thinking about and talking about Baker Mayfield and like how good he has been at times for fantasy made me remember like how much of the Zach Robinson quotes I've read where he's like really excited to work with Baker, and he's mentioned his mobility specifically. And it's like, it's such a huge change, like what he's going to here from the quarterbacks that he's had. And I'm really, really excited for how this all could come together. So Tampa Bay, just again, like I think so many of them could be really good picks. Even the backfield, I don't know exactly what to do with it yet. I think Bucky Irving is a valid bounce back pick. But if you want to go cheaper, I think either of the other two, Sean Tucker or Kenneth Gainwell, could be the answer as well. I think it kind of reminds me of Jacksonville's backfield a little bit. I'm pretty intrigued by Tampa Bay. So I said there's like two play callers that Ryan and I think seem to be in agreement on are like maybe the most likely to really swing fantasy in a big way this year that people aren't on so much, like Mike McDaniel with the Chargers, for example. Like everybody's on that. I think it's Robinson and Tampa Bay, and then I think it's Drew Petzing with Detroit, which everybody knows Detroit is a print shop. But these two just are interesting, like corollaries for me, where I think the play callers themselves are slept on, and also are good at boosting like specifically the types of players that are on the team for fantasy. And then also both of these teams, I think, could be pass funnels where their defense is good against the run, but bad against the pass. Like clearly the weakness of the defense is the secondary, both Tampa Bay and Detroit. And I think we just could see like pretty massive shootouts for these teams. So I wanted to talk about Drew Petzing because he's like my original evil genius. We talked about Sean Mannion earlier and like the quotes there with him being evil genius. That's like 90% because he actually looks like one. Like he looks like an evil genius from a movie or something. And it's 10% because I'm obsessed with Drew Petzing's run game. So some real quick stats on that. They're just crazy. 6th in success rate on running back runs during his first 2 seasons, with the highest explosive run rate in the league. Arizona's explosive run rate those 2 seasons, and I'm looking at those 2 because the backfield completely fell apart last year. But those first 2 seasons he was the OC, the running back explosive run rate was higher than any Mike McDaniel 2-year stretch in Miami. It was ridiculous what was happening there. Like James Conner never rushed for more than 1,000 yards across 6 NFL seasons. And then he did it in each of his first 2 seasons with Petzing. And then we see him get hurt. We see Trey Benson get hurt. We're running out Michael Carter off the street as, you know, like the starting bell cow running back and stuff. Like Bam Knight out of nowhere. Like it was a mess. But like before that, the 2 seasons before that, this backfield was 9th in fantasy points. And if you look at the backfields who scored more, pretty much exclusively the backfields that have like Jonathan Taylor on them or whatever, you know, like the best players in the league. And then, oh yeah, there's Arizona, which doesn't make sense because the team wasn't good. The offensive line wasn't good. The running backs were pretty good. Like James Conner is underrated, but he's not a superstar. And yet they're top 10 in fantasy points. So yeah, I'm really excited for Jahmyr Gibbs. The tight end impact obviously has been felt in Arizona with Drew Petzing. And then last year just got out of control where they were a fantasy point print shop in a number of different ways. But still, I'm lower than you on Drew Petzing. You had him in the A tier. I put him in the B tier with like Andy Reid. So I thought that was high praise. Talk me through your Drew Petzing ranking.
Yeah, so Scott Barrett kind of moved me on this a little bit. So everything you laid out about his first 2 years in the run game being amazing is true, and that's a big part of kind of what I'm thinking in this ranking. But also, he pivoted fairly effectively last year, at least from a fantasy sense, right? All of his running backs get hurt. Brings Jacoby Brissett in. He just leads the NFL in dropbacks per start. Has the highest pass rate of any team in fantasy points data history. So over the past 5 seasons, one of the highest early down pass rate over expectations. He just completely pivoted everything that he'd done. And I want like give a play caller a lot of credit for that, to pivot away towards something that has a better chance to work when the personnel so radically changes, when you just lose all of your running backs. And of course, it didn't matter in Arizona because the defense was also completely destroyed and they just were not competitive in games whatsoever. But yeah, it's pretty impressive to me that this guy who we like praise for the run game so much loses all his running backs, turns Trey McBride into one of the like best fantasy tight end seasons we've seen recently, matched only by Travis Kelce in recent memory, over 18 fantasy points per game. Gets Michael Wilson averaging like wide receiver 1 level numbers over the same stretch, with the team's wide receiver 1, Marvin Harrison Jr. out. Like that's just pretty crazy to me and impressive. And I felt like, at least for fantasy purposes, that Petzing deserved some credit there. And kind of turning to the Lions, I think that the fit here is particularly interesting, just because I think Dan Campbell and Jared Goff kind of cover a lot of Petzing's weaknesses. So if you were to point out like one play calling weakness that Petzing has, or at least something that he hasn't used a ton, it is the motion during snap motion, pre-snap motion. All of that have not really been features of his offenses. Same with playing from under center. So you can argue about how much of that is like just Kyler Murray's fault, and we're about to find out, I think. But if you just put together just the run game efficiency that Petzing has created, the amazing tight end usage that he has facilitated, in terms of Trey McBride just hitting over 75% route participation in 29 games in a row under him, which is something that Sam Laporta's only done 18 times in his career, and he's averaged 16 fantasy points per game in all of those games where he's done that. So that's really fun. If Laporta's just on the field more and scoring as a high-end tight end one because of that, I think that's very possible. And then, you bring in Goff, who's been one of the best users of motion, of getting under center in the NFL. It just has massively boosted his efficiency, Amon-Ra St. Brown's, Jameson Williams' efficiency on these plays with motion at the snap. Unless you want to be super pessimistic and say, oh, Petzing just will not let him use it, which I do not think has any chance of happening, considering what happened to the last Lions OC that went against Jared Goff and Dan Campbell and how they want to run their passing game, which is that Campbell stepped in halfway through the season and made the offense amazing again. I just think that there's kind of no way to lose here. I think the run game could be even better and more efficient. I think Laporta could be more involved, and I think just the drop back game could be the best one by far that Petzing has ever had. So just, putting all this together, I hope Petzing gets credit. I hope Dan Campbell gets some freaking credit, because I feel like he's extremely overlooked just in terms of how much people are willing to praise Ben Johnson. Like, Dan Campbell was the one that originally kind of put all of this play action and motion and everything into the Lions offense before Johnson was ever the OC there. I just really like this combination. I think I'm very bullish on that idea, just that they cover each other's weaknesses. They both bring really good strengths to the table for these fantasy players.
I know it's not realistic because the ADP is so high on the top two players, but this is the offense I would like the most exposure to of any offense, including the Chargers, who I was so excited about earlier. Because like you said, I do think it's safe either way. They were not quite as high as that crazy 2024 Ben Johnson season that I cited, but it was better than 23 and 22 in terms of fantasy production last year. It was fantastic, even with the awkwardness of the offensive coordinator stuff early in the year, offensive line injuries. Like, there were a lot of things that happened last year that affected the Lions offense, and they still were really, really productive. I think Petzing fits really well. One last stat I would throw in that I think is a little bit overlooked. You brought up the under center stuff with Kyler Murray, more liking play action and liking things a bit static and stuff. They were first in under center drop back rate in 2025. So when they were under center, the percentage of those plays that were passes, he actually led all of these guys, which I think is really interesting. Like, number 2 is McVay, number 3 is Ben Johnson, number 4 is Matt LaFleur, Brian Schottenheimer is 6, Mike McDaniel is 7. I think this is really, really good when you can show the run, and especially since he made a real competent run game, threatened with the run, and you definitely have that with Jahmyr Gibbs, and then actually be dropping back in those situations a lot and getting good matchups and stuff. They were 5th in 2024. So it wasn't just the weird circumstances last year where they're playing from behind and everything. But as soon as he went away from Kyler Murray, it was even more. It was first in the whole league. Lots to say about Drew Petzing. I love it. I love that you put him in A tier. I did have him in B tier. There's one other guy here who we had a flippening on here, and I'm realizing it now that I incorrectly put him in the A tier. A tier was supposed to be only the guys that we agreed on. You have Matt LaFleur in the B tier. And I found that very interesting. Is that just because he's the opposite of concentrated offense? Is it just some Latin Christian Watson frustration that's built up over the years? What's happening here? I feel like LaFleur is clearly up here in the A tier.
Yeah, so if this were real life play callers, LaFleur would be S tier to me. I think in real life he's extremely underrated. I think the 3 or 4 primetime games a year where Packers fans are calling for his job, I think those people are insane. I would love Matt LaFleur as my team's play caller. That would be amazing. But yeah, for fantasy, it's just the lower dropbacks rates combined with the slower pace at times, and plus just how much he has loved to use these wide receivers by committee, rotating his receivers, giving the 40% route share to Dontavian Wicks, giving us probably this year, I'm hoping not, but it could be just the Savion Williams snaps. They played that defensive back hybrid whose name is escaping me right now a bunch as well. Bo Melton, thank you. Just all of that for me is I'm a little bitter at Matt LaFleur from a fantasy perspective. I do think that can change this year, though, and it does kind of sound like it's going to, at least from some of his quotes in the offseason, is just, with Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks off this team, there are really only 3 credible starting receivers in Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, and even Matthew Golden, if you count him, which I'm not even sure I do personally. LaFleur himself has said, like, it's probably going to be easier to get looks to our star players now, just that we don't have so many of them. So that's like pretty fun to me for Watson and Reed specifically, who have just always been, or not always, but on big stretches have been some of the most efficient per route players in the NFL. Just the idea that they could now play legitimately full-time route shares is exciting. Christian Watson averages over 17 fantasy points per game in 13 games that he's run over 75% of the routes. Reed is at just over 14 fantasy points per game in his 12 career games above 70%. Like these players can be and have been high-end fantasy options if they are just in legitimate full-time receiving roles. And this is like the best chance for that to happen in years. So I'm like in on those guys. I think, this like LaFleur tendency could actually just twist this year and like work in our favor now after working against us for so long. But when it comes to ranking him, just thinking of like, how excited am I in general over the past few years to have his players in fantasy, that's kind of where I just put him into the B tier. But maybe some sour grapes there, as you said.
To be fair, he hasn't, in terms of actual fantasy production, the past 3 years hasn't been quite as elite as a lot of the guys we've talked about so far. So 13th in 2023 in fantasy points, 8th in 2024, 16th in 2025. That's good, but it's not quite as good as some of these other guys. 11th in fantasy points last year and 6th in non-quarterback fantasy points last year was Klint Kubiak. And Ryan, when you sent me your list, Kubiak was the first name in your A tier. Is that indicative of how you think about him? Were they in any sort of order? Talking about Klint Kubiak.
I think so. I think, Kubiak, along with a couple other guys in my A tier, he was one I considered putting into S. I think ultimately, as you said earlier, we haven't seen him do it as a head coach. So that's always like a thing that can go wrong as these guys make the transition. Some of them are genius play callers, but they're not always going to be able to do it at a high level at the same time as leading a team. Like leadership skills and everything are separate and different and not always something that guys can do at the same time. So that's one thing with Kubiak. The other thing is just the pass rates are generally pretty low for Kubiak, which his players have succeeded in fantasy in spite of that, just because of how amazingly efficient guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba, even Rashid Shaheed with Derek Carr in 2024, have been with these like deep play action shots that Kubiak is like the best in the league at from an efficiency standpoint. But like just the lower pass rates over expectation, the slower pace. I think these are all things kind of weighing against Kubiak a little bit. So that just all of that keeps him out of the S tier. But I mean, don't get me wrong. I am quite high on him as a play caller. He is the only reason that I'm even entertaining drafting Raiders this year. It is. I do want to pose it to you though, because it is maybe more than any other play caller team combo here. We have 2 Raiders going inside the first 2 rounds of fantasy drafts. The Raiders are bottom 5 in implied point total or implied points per game per Vegas. So the betting markets don't expect them to put up a lot of just real life points this year. But in fantasy, we're drafting 2 of them inside the first 2 rounds. I think Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers are both elite talents, amazing players. I think Klint Kubiak is an elite play caller that has elevated every offense and all of the personnel that he has ever really gotten his hands on. Even going back to the 2021 Vikings, all of his offenses have been projected to have really bad offensive lines that would hold them back, and that's never really been the case. It's never mattered. He's just kind of elevated beyond that everywhere he's gone. So, it's like to be in on the Raiders, you kind of, to me, I think, kind of have to say, oh, well, Vegas is just wrong. They are underrating Kubiak right now. I think there's a good chance that that's the case, but it is maybe more than any other team and any other like big play caller take I have. I am the most, I have to like think the hardest about that one just because it's so, we're just so diametrically opposed to what Vegas thinks this offense will look like.
No, I think it's totally fair and a good point to bring up because it's really easy to get excited about these players. Brock Bowers and Ashton Jeanty are awesome, man. And the thing is, like, their ADP is just suggesting that we're going to be right. And I think that we could, but like, I don't know, man. I think that says something that Vegas is where they're at with the Raiders right after we saw, I mean, we just saw this guy literally like kick ass all the way to the Super Bowl and just take it. And just like be consistently ahead of like really good defensive coordinators with what he was doing, and then get the head coaching job. And it just doesn't seem to matter. Really. They're just like, kind of business as usual for the Raiders is where Vegas seems to be. That is weird. And I think it's noteworthy. The Chargers are the ones that have stood out to me where I'm extremely excited about them and think that they could lead the league in points, but they're more like 10th or 12th in most Vegas projections. I think that's valid. That's a good point to bring up, especially when the pieces are so expensive. So yeah, last year you and I were opposed on our Brock Bowers viewpoint. I'm curious where you've landed on him. Are you drafting Ashton Jeanty at the back end of round one? What any takes? It's basically those two, unless you have anybody else from the Raiders you want to talk about.
Yeah, so I am drafting Jeanty. I think he is. So everything I just said about the Raiders in terms of implied Vegas total, that's true and that weighs on me. They're still implied for I think like 4 or 5 more points per game than they actually scored last year. So Vegas does expect them to be way better, but it's just still
last year was
bottom. Yeah, exactly. But it's still like bottom 5 in the league, but they expect it to be way better. Jeanty profiled to me in his rookie season better than like any of these top 10 drafted rookie running backs that we've had come out for the past 5 seasons. He was just immediately at a top 5 rate of goal line carries among his team. We did not see that with Bijan Robinson. We did not see that with Jahmyr Gibbs as rookies. He was immediately a top 5 or top 6 running back in terms of route participation rate, target share, the receiving angle that we care about that's so important for fantasy. Everything was basically there except for the Raiders offense being completely terrible. Both of us, I feel like, have tweeted 15 different versions of the Ashton Jeanty was actually amazingly efficient when he didn't get hit behind the line of scrimmage stat. All you really need for Jeanty to be a massive win, I think even at the 1-2 turn, is for the offense to be passable. I feel okay about it being passable is kind of where I'm at. I think your worst case with the Raiders and Kubiak is that they are, again, very run heavy, very slow pace, but it just turns into a ton of volume and decently efficient volume for a Jeanty. He's insulated against negative game scripts if the defense doesn't hold up, which come on, don't really expect that it will. So I think Jeanty's like pretty safe, pretty high upside, even given the Vegas win total concerns. With Bowers, I'm in best ball. I've been drafting Bowers in best ball, but the bar for me in managed redraft to draft a tight end in round 2 is a lot higher. Just because we've seen like the most late round success at tight end of any position. So you're like giving up one of your best and only shots at drafting a league winning running back or wide receiver there at the back end of round 2 to take a Bowers when in most seasons you can hit on a late round tight end that is going to get you 70 to 80% of what like an amazing Bowers season could be. So I'm waffling a little bit more there. Rich Rebar, when you had him on, I thought brought up a great point that, if we are worried about pass rate and pace for anybody here, it should be Brock Bowers. But my answer is I don't really know. I'm still writing Anatomy of a League Winner. I haven't gotten to tight ends yet, but when I do, I'm going to I have a lot of like thinking and soul searching to do on exactly how in on Brock Bowers do I want to be, versus like an AJ Brown, for example, going towards the back half of the second round.
Yeah, that was an interesting point from Rich Rebar that you brought up. And then, like I've said a few times now, the route volume is what we really are looking for. And when I look at the top tight ends in ADP, like a lot of them seem like they project to be in run heavy offenses. And I do think that's the way that the Raiders prefer to play, probably, is kind of if Kubiak is going to try to scrape out wins, it's probably going to be kind of playing slow and leaning on the ground game. So I don't really know. People kind of just have pushed back on that and said, well, they're just going to play from behind and Brock Bowers is awesome. So like he's going to run a lot of routes. It's like, I don't know if that's exactly how it works, but maybe if they're getting blown out every single game in the first quarter, then like maybe, I'm not sure. I think that's interesting. The chat really wants to talk about Kellen Moore. They're saying Kellen Moore needs to be an S tier. I know that you've dug into him a lot. He's somebody who I've been just like all along the way, like even like I think he could really help Devonta Smith. I think he could really help Chris Olave, he's really boosted receivers with pre-snap motion and just getting a lot of moving parts where things are easy, I think, for his quarterback. And we saw a lot of those easy looks last year, and Olave definitely has the skill set to do that again. I'm curious what you think. I know you're big on Jordan Tyson. I think having the two of them together complements each other really, really well with what Kellen Moore likes to do. And then the last thing I wanted to mention before I get your thoughts on Moore is he's very unique in that he does not use horizontally breaking routes very much at all relative to the rest of these play callers that we really like, play designers that we really like. This is something that has been really effective and efficient in boosting production, and Moore doesn't really do it very much at all, like near the bottom of the league. And so I'm curious what you think about all of this as you look forward to Moore and the fantasy football impact of 2026.
Kellen Moore is great. He's not one that always uses all of these play calling cheat codes like you were mentioning, but yeah, he's what we can expect from him is really fast pace, running a lot of plays that typically can help an offense, especially one that maybe doesn't have the most elite personnel in the league, kind of keep up in fantasy. So I do like Kellen Moore. I think Chris Olave is maybe being drafted a little bit at his ceiling. I just feel like last year everyone was so out on Chris Olave because, he constantly gets injured, the concussions. He hasn't put up a low end fantasy wide receiver one season in a while. And I was a little more open to, I think this could work with Kellen Moore when Olave had a 6th round ADP, but now he just has a 3rd round ADP. And it's Tyson that's a bit cheaper. So I'm in on Tyson kind of just for that reason. I think this could be a lot of drop back volume, perhaps a year 2 step forward from Tyler Shuck. I think Moore can get just the dropbacks and the fantasy points out of this offense. The guy I'm most out on probably because of a Kellen Moore tendency is Travis Etienne. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is that Moore is just kind of the opposite of Liam Coen when it comes to design targets. You just mentioned that Moore has really boosted a lot of his receivers, getting them in motion. That also will implicate design targets as well a lot of the time. Moore does that for his receivers. He doesn't do it at all for his running backs, despite having a lot of really good running backs that he's called plays for over his career. None of Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, or Alvin Kamara last year averaged more than 0.75 design targets per game. Under Moore, only Austin Eckler has gotten even close to 1 design target per game. And for comparison, Liam Coen is the master of this. Travis Etienne just averaged 2.5 fantasy points per game just on design targets last year. So I do think that could kind of get stripped out of Etienne's workload. I don't know that he's going to be much of a pass catcher in this offense when, the other options are Chris Olave and Jordan Tyson, and that they can really use a short passing game through those guys if Moore desires to. It's like I said, it should be a high drop back offense, but not necessarily a top scoring offense. So if Travis Etienne is closer to a 2-down player on not one of the highest scoring offenses in the league, his ADP is absolutely awful right now. It's the complete opposite of the the case that we made for DeAndre Swift earlier in this episode. So I think Etienne is a guy, Travis Etienne is a guy I'm avoiding. But I'm open to all the pass catchers basically.
I want to talk about the Bengals. I feel like Zach Taylor is really easy to overlook because he doesn't do a lot of the sexy stuff that a lot of these guys do that we like to point to that helps boost efficiency and everything. But at the end of the day, his offense has been massive for fantasy. it's extremely concentrated. And there's some rumblings that maybe we'll see more of the stuff that we do like this year. So I've got here, like from our buddy Jared Smola, like Bengals planning to use more under center this year. Like obviously good news for Joe Burrow in the passing game, but also this Chase Brown data I think is interesting. Talk to me about Zach Taylor and the Bengals.
Yeah, so Taylor has kind of been like the black sheep of the McShanahan coaching tree. He's always been paired with Joe Burrow for his entire time as a play caller. So the results have always been good for fantasy, right? We've never really been complaining about what his players do in fantasy. Always near the top of the league in pass rate over expectation, in dropbacks per game. So all of that like works, and that's kind of all that we've needed from an offense that has freaking Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase on it. So yeah, I agree. You can't like be super low on Zach Taylor. I don't know that I give him a ton of like independent credit for like how great the offense is, but he has not gotten in the way is what you can definitely say. He's let them drop back a ton and put up a ton of fantasy points. But yeah, the under center stuff is interesting because Joe Burrow's never really played a significant percentage of snaps under center. This is like one thing you're just hearing constantly around the league is it feels like every quarterback wants to get more under center. I think teams are waking up to the idea that playing from under center really marries the run and the pass games more effectively. It makes it harder for a defense to respond to play action, to just know what you're going to do out of any particular look. So if you can play more under center, it just gives you so many more options. And it does increase efficiency just across the league, despite like some of the best quarterbacks playing a lot from the shotgun, like Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. A lot of these guys have been primarily like shotgun quarterbacks. So that's like pretty interesting that if Burrow goes under center a little more, he hasn't actually been more efficient under center over his career. So like maybe he's just right that he's one of the few guys that's better from the shotgun, and it's may not end up being a big deal. But I did think it's interesting that T. Higgins has been way more efficient on all of his under center dropbacks since 2021, over 3 yards per out run to Chase being under 2. T. Higgins is just underrated in every single year in fantasy football. He's the stats on screen, but yeah, he's the wide receiver 6 in Joe Burrow starts over the past 2 seasons. He goes way below that on the Sharp platforms. On the home league platforms, he goes like round 4 or later on a lot of them. It's just kind of crazy to me. He's just like a free low end wide receiver 1 that you can draft much later than you should be able to do that to me this year. So he's like probably my biggest takeaway. Smola makes great points on Chase Brown as well. I'm big into him. Like, I just love the Bengals. What else am I supposed to say, man, about Zach Taylor in this offense? They're all really good, and they all score a lot of fantasy points.
I think the T. Higgins point is good, and it's also annoying to me because it's like, oh, great. Like this range of receivers, you see my wide receiver rankings up on the screen. This range of receivers that's already really frustrating for me to work through because I like all of them. I feel reasons for optimism for all of their offenses and their play designers and everything. And T. Higgins is just like in the middle of it. Don't have any idea what to do with him. Definitely think that he should be right after the top 12, but I don't want to really, like, in all honesty, if I'm on the clock, I want to draft Ladd McConkey there. I don't want to draft T. Higgins, Check this out, Ryan. Jalen Waddle way higher since the last time you and I talked. Thanks, buddy.
Love it.
Yeah. All right. That's good stuff. Let's flip it back over to the play callers here. We've talked about basically everybody in the A tier except for KOC and Shane Steichen. Let's talk about KOC. Where are you at? I know you're excited about Kyler, but I haven't talked to you about the Vikings in probably a month or so. So where are you at on KOC?
Yeah. A year ago, KOC would have been S tier for me. I think we just found out that he's not literally Superman. He's not completely invincible. There is a limit to his long running streak of just getting fantasy QB1 play out of any random quarterback that was plopped into his lap, whether it was Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs, and even Carson Wentz last year. If you just look at those 3 guys, 12 full games, those names have averaged 18 fantasy points per game under Kevin O'Connell. So like roughly a low end QB1. That's pretty damn good and pretty damn impressive. He's still, even with JJ McCarthy and Max Brosmer playing a lot of the season last year, still showed us that he wants to be very pass heavy inside the 10-yard line. He's ranked top 5 in pass rate there over each of the past 3 seasons. So that just kind of opens up his quarterback and his receivers to these higher touchdown totals. Just because we can be very confident that they're throwing there. That kind of goes to my Kyler Murray optimism, which is more dropbacks in the red zone. If he's not throwing a touchdown there, he's probably scrambling for one. So you can get like a strong fantasy touchdown outcome out of Kyler, even if maybe the offense isn't like the most efficient in the league. Just off of pure dropback volume. They still haven't added to their backfield in a meaningful way. It's still washed Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, who washed Aaron Jones was alphaing at points last year. So that's like, I think they're still going to build through the pass as O'Connell kind of always has. And I'm optimistic about Murray trying to make this transition to more of an under center heavy offense, which is what O'Connell has always preferred to run. I don't know that it's like 100% going to work, but it's like the exact type of bet that you should be making for a late round fantasy quarterback, where you have the mobility, you have at least the potential for an efficient offense and a strong touchdown total. And you have, just the great history of QB1 production here. So Murray's just like the easiest, like super late round quarterback click to me this year.
Makes a lot of sense. The data that I have on KOC here fell off last year, 28th in non-quarterback fantasy points. It was awful. And I do want to get your opinion on something really specific with the over-the-middle stuff with Kyler. But the 2 years prior, 5th in non-quarterback fantasy points, 8th in non-quarterback fantasy points. And while we're here, I wanted to point you towards Kellen Moore. Over the past 3 seasons, he's been 22nd, 20th, and 16th in non-quarterback fantasy points, respectively. So, like, maybe slow down with the S-tier stuff. I don't really understand why we get so excited with Kellen Moore. He helps, like, he's elevated a few specific superstars for sure. But, I just don't think he has the track record that a lot of these other coaches do. Okay, so the specific point I wanted to ask you about with Kyler, did you see me tweeting about middle of field throws? I put together a quick thread yesterday and talked about Kyler and Ladd McConkey. I do worry about that because that's been such a huge part of Justin Jefferson's offering, is that he gets those deep intermediate middle of the field targets and dominates with them. He's 23 and 24, those 2 seasons. He had even more points than Tyreek Hill on those on a per game basis. He led the league. And then we saw what happened last year with JJ McCarthy, who's like league low middle of the field throw rates. Kyler's not quite as low, but definitely has not liked to target that area of the field. Are you just kind of like KOC, Justin Jefferson, Kyler? Like, I think it's just going to be good enough that it's still a good pick, and it could even be fine. Could even be like really good if Kyler can connect with him on some of the improv stuff. Or are you kind of like out on Jefferson because his price isn't really that low relative to how bad last year was?
Yeah, I think you can have different I have the same take on this offense, but I think it's okay to have different takes on Kyler Murray and Justin Jefferson and just the upside and the risk that each of them present where they go. If the Kyler experiment is kind of a failure, or if it's not a super efficient offense, Kyler can still be a totally viable fantasy quarterback with the rushing, right? And even if he's not, that's like that's not a big deal to miss on your late round fantasy quarterback. You can usually stream a guy decently well, right? That's a place where you should only care about the upside and not the downside outcome. But yeah, for Justin Jefferson, I do care about the downside outcome. I was saying last offseason that the middle of the field angle was a reason that I was not in on Marvin Harrison Jr., and that I would become interested in Marvin Harrison Jr. as soon as Kyler Murray was out of Arizona. So yeah, I think that does somewhat transfer to Justin Jefferson. It's a great point that you made, that so much of his scoring has come in that area. I think with Kyler, and we'll talk about middle of the field target rate for Jalen Hurts later, probably too. I might have a different opinion there. But yeah, for Kyler, I think it maybe is like a physical limitation. Like I think maybe he is just too short to see it very well and to want to throw the ball there. So I do think that's a legit concern. And yeah, for Jefferson, where the alternative is all of these running backs around the late first and the 1-2 turn that I think are really strong bets. I totally get being cautious or out on Jefferson from that angle. I think that's valid, and I think I agree with that.
I'm coming around on Kyler. Last time you talked, I was like, I think I would just rather have Malik Willis. I'll point you to this Scramblers episode. I had Kyler really surprisingly high. After digging into it more and more, I think it's more just that they didn't want him to scramble so much, or he didn't want to, or something lately. But even later into his career, we've still seen really good efficiency from him as a scrambler. And at times we've seen some decent volume pile up. I think, now that he's playing for his job, he's like the most underpaid quarterback in the NFL. Like, we might see him have to do it more. I think he's a great pick. I wanted to again point towards this 12 receivers who can win versus any fantasy or versus any coverage, because my biggest fantasy receiver breakout pick this year is probably just Josh Downs. Like, I know it's really simple and obvious, and I don't mean for it to just be like, oh, he averages 2 yards per run, he's going to do that all year long. Like, there's a lot of reasons to be worried about the Colts, but I did want to just wrap up our AT here with Shane Steichen, who we do have firmly here. He hasn't been quite as productive as some of these guys, but he's also had, a couple hands tied behind his back at a lot of different stops along the way here with the Colts. He's somebody who I hear is on the hot seat at times, sometimes during the off seasons, and that's just always been crazy to me. I feel like he's done such a good job when he's had healthy pieces. But I don't know if he's going to have healthy pieces. Quarterback, wide receiver, offensive line is diminished, I think, from last year. So I'm a little bit nervous. But I do know that Steichen can maximize specific players in their roles and find really good ways to get fantasy production out of them. So I think he belongs in A tier. That's where you and I both had him. I'm curious if you're drafting much at the Colts.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add on Steichen. Probably he's like one of the best users of play action in the NFL right now. His quarterback track record is really, really strong outside of specifically Anthony Richardson. He got Jalen Hurts playing at a really, really high level in his rookie season or first season after he took over from Wentz, whenever that timeline was. But yeah, I think we talked about this last time a little bit, I think, which is that Jonathan Taylor, his ADP just assumes that the Colts will be exactly as good as they were last year. And especially like Josh Downs's and maybe sort of Alec Pierce's and definitely Daniel Jones's does not assume that whatsoever. I think if you're attacking one end of that, you just attack where you're getting the ADP discount, and you just immediately kind of win if Daniel Jones is anywhere near as effective coming off the Achilles. But I am a little bit afraid of Taylor for that exact reason. Just where I think there are similar better bets like into round 2 for teams that have just better overall offensive outlooks.
It's going to seem crazy, but I have Jonathan Taylor behind a lot of the guys we've talked about today. So obviously Christian McCaffrey, but I also have him behind Ashton Genty and Chase Brown and Amari Hampton. I'm pretty nervous. I'm down to draft Downs because I think as long as he doesn't get hurt, which it could definitely happen, I think he can succeed in a number of different outcomes here for the Colts offense, even if it's not a good offense. And he's so cheap. But yeah, the Jonathan Taylor pick at his price is absolutely terrifying to me. Right. I think that pretty much wraps it for A tier. A couple guys who I had in the A tier that you didn't. I'm curious if you have anything you want to add, because I think the resume speaks for themselves. And it's Josh McDaniels and Joe Brady. Is it just kind of annoyance with the Bills? Like, they produce fantasy points, but how does it actually help us?
Yeah, it's partially that. And I think also when I put these lists together, I try to separate the play caller from the players a little bit in terms of like, if I dropped this play caller onto any particular team with any particular quarterback, what do I think would happen? I'm like just not that convinced that Joe Brady would be like a high-end play caller with a team that we're targeting in fantasy. Like, he's been extreme. He's just turned the Bills extremely run heavy since he took over. And it's been decent for James Cook and it's been fine for Josh Allen. It kind of doesn't matter with him. He's always going to put up fantasy points, but yeah, like just our like nightmares of all these Bills wide receivers. I think from a fantasy lens, you want to hold them to account a little bit for that. And the same thing with Josh McDaniels. I think from like a real life perspective, maybe I'm a little higher on McDaniels, but he hasn't created like amazing fantasy outcomes on offenses that don't involve Tom Brady or Drake May. And even then, it's like Tom Brady, best quarterback of all time. Drake May, I won't make a comparison there, but it's like
I'll do it.
For getting like we get what, like an obnoxiously split backfield last year that was very efficient, to be fair. And like 70% route share Stephon Diggs, where like he could have broken fantasy if he was playing a legit full-time role, and then like annoying wide receiver rotations kind of everywhere else. And also like not that different looking back at especially like the later Brady days. Like I just, fantasy friendliness wise, I just don't know if I'm there with McDaniels either. I've
got another YouTube video to show you. Drake May and AJ Brown likely light the league on fire in 2026. That's where I'm at. I think Josh McDaniels is really good. I think that so is Joe Brady. I think they're both a little bit underrated. So let me dig up the McDaniels stuff. Fourth in non-quarterback fantasy points last year. I don't know. Maybe it's the schedule, but I think that either running back could hit, especially if one of the other two goes down. And I think potentially they both could get there. I think the offensive line is going to be better. I think A.J. Brown is going to have a huge year, and I just feel good about drafting this offense. I even think Romeo Doubs is an okay pick. I think he's a good player. Do you think that they're going to rotate those ancillary pieces behind A.J. Brown? Like, do you think Doubs is a full-time player?
I think Dobbs is probably a full-time player. Yeah. But also Romeo Doubs is just... I will have 0% Romeo, 0 shares, 0 cares of Romeo Doubs, at least in managed leagues. I don't think he has the upside that you want in any format outside of best ball. But I'm with you on AJ Brown. I do think specifically for him, like there's a really good case to be made that he's one of the better like round 2 wide receiver picks that you can make this year. So I'm there with you. I think I just give more of that. I attribute maybe more of that to A.J. Brown and to Drake May than I do to Josh McDaniels.
Who has a higher first down per route run rate over the past 2 or 3 years? Romeo Doubs or your favorite Green Bay Packers receiver, Matt? Or Ryan, who do you think?
First downs per route run, it's probably Romeo Doubs.
Yeah, it might be Watson.
Yards per route run, it is definitely not Romeo Doubs.
I think people sleep on Doubs. I think he really has been pretty good. But yeah, it doesn't matter. Let's talk about Joe Brady, because I think this could matter. I think DJ Moore is interesting, even though I'm not sure where he's at in his career. I think there's an outcome where it's good this year. And then obviously James Cook is a beast and is going to continue to be one, I think. And then maybe Dalton Kincaid. Maybe. I'm kind of buying it a little bit. So Joe Brady, it's not just Josh Allen. They're 11th, 9th, and 10th in non-quarterback fantasy points for the past 3 years. Last year, 11th in motion at the snap, 3rd in play actions, 6th in under center dropbacks. I like all of that. I would just want to throw that out there to defend him a little bit, because it's like, I don't know. Like, he does a lot of the stuff that we like. But yeah, at the end of the day, you got to deal with over and over and over. Be like, this is the year, Elijah Moore, Josh Palmer, whatever. Like, I get it. Gabe Davis. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else from B tier that you feel like talking about? Any Andy Reid thoughts for us? Or are you ready to talk about some of these new play callers?
Maybe we can kind of start with, you just threw Sean Payton into B tier here, I see. Maybe we just talk about him and Davis Webb, or you just want to talk about Broncos as a transition? Yeah.
If I were to place any of the two new guys into the B tier, it's Webb and Declan Doyle. And you put them all in their own tier. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. That's why I put Payton there as like kind of a placeholder for this conversation.
Gotcha. Yeah. I gave you a list here. Yeah. So if I've just put all the new guys in their own like new guy tier, we don't know. But if I were forced to actually like separate them out, the ones that I would put a little higher, like in B tier, would be Davis Webb, Declan Doyle, and Sean Mannion. And then the others I would just put like into C tier or a bit lower. So those are probably the three that I just mentioned: Declan Doyle with the Ravens, Davis Webb with the Broncos, Sean Mannion with the Eagles, that I'm most optimistic about overall in terms of new guys.
Yeah, I've liked what the Broncos have done. More motion, more play action recently. I'm pretty intrigued. You and I are both very high on Jalen Waddle. Are you drafting anyone else from Denver though?
Yeah, super high on Waddle, so he's like the headliner there. Bo Nix, I go back and forth on. I really like it as a best ball pick. I think he's great. Does he have the upside for managed redraft? I'm not entirely sure. I'm mulling that one over still. But yeah, great case to be made just in terms of drop back volume. In terms of like if he just gets a little better at football, this is an offense that can support. That's another like kind of interesting bet for like most passing touchdowns this year. Bo Nix would not like totally knock my socks off. The other Bronco that I think I am in on now that I am going to be drafting is RJ Harvey. I'm all the way back to RJ Harvey. I feel like I've done a big circle this entire offseason. But just to kind of make the case, and I guess none of this is really is that related to Sean Payton or to Davis Webb as a play caller, other than just liking the offense overall and like wanting a piece of this backfield. RJ Harvey is weird to me because basically the bet worked last year. The bet you made was by the end of the season, Harvey is going to, whether through injury or performing well, is going to take over this backfield and it will be a strong fantasy football role. That was the case. After the bye in 5 or 6 games, something like that type of sample, over 15 expected fantasy points per game, over 16 actual fantasy points per game. RJ Harvey was in pretty close to just a 3-down bell cow role, was a mid-range fantasy RB1. And we get into the offseason. Every film guy gives their takes of RJ Harvey was not a very good runner last year. And you know what? That's fair enough. A lot of the numbers say that too. I would just challenge how much that actually matters or how predictive that's actually been for rookie running backs. Christian McCaffrey, I think, was below 4 yards per carry as a rookie. Le'Veon Bell, I believe, was below 4 yards per carry as a rookie or down in that range. They were not good or effective runners as rookies either. And running back rushing efficiency is very volatile, is not very stable at all in general. RJ Harvey in... What is this like just his 3rd or 4th year total playing the position because he was a converted QB in college? I want to like leave room for him to just get better as a runner, right? In year 2 of the NFL. So there's that angle. There's the angle that for all of the smoke around the Broncos wanting to add more running backs in the draft or in free agency or being in on David Montgomery, ultimately all they did was like a pretty cheap like veteran type of contract to bring J.K. Dobbins back and a day 3 running back, Jonah Coleman, who I like, but who should not really be projected to take a significant slice of the workload in year 1, I wouldn't say. So then you're just left with Harvey, where it's like he led all running backs in expected fantasy points per route run last year because a big part of the Sean Payton offense is design targets, throwing to running backs, especially in the red zone. Harvey, had a better per route role than Christian McCaffrey did, or Jahmyr Gibbs or Devon Achane. Those are the next 3 names on that XFP per route run list that RJ Harvey was at the top of. So he was very much trusted and very effective in that role. He did have like some explosiveness, some big plays, even on the ground. Like there were positives to his profile as well. So now you can just make the same bet as you did in his rookie year, where either J.K. Dobbins gets injured again. He's averaged like 8 games per season over the last 4 years, the most injury-prone running back in the NFL, or Harvey gets even better and he just takes over the backfield. And Harvey is multiple rounds cheaper than he was as a rookie. What am I missing here? Like I get that was like negative sentiment on him over the offseason in terms of how the Broncos were viewing him and how they wanted to go forward. But that doesn't preclude him getting better or Dobbins getting injured again or any of these things happening to the roster that can instantly change the Broncos' minds. Like if Harvey shows up well in training camp or in the early season, I expect them to allow him to run the ball more. Like I don't think he's just like perma blocked into only a pass catching role ever. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's like an insane person RJ Harvey rant. But I really think if we've super overlooked any running back this year, then it's him.
Okay, that is very interesting. You don't get a lot of RJ Harvey takes on here. I went back to look at his game log just to refresh myself because I don't remember him being particularly useful before the injury, which was week 10. And that was basically the case. But we did get some spike weeks, 20 points in week 4, 24 in week 8, 17 in week 9 PPR points. But lots of, I mean, other than that, it's like 6 or fewer points basically. I'm nervous with Harvey that it just is going to kind of be the same role no matter what. And that Jonah Coleman is like the 1-for-1 is basically where I'm at. Because I think Coleman is good. And I think Coleman can do a lot of the things you need. And so I see Harvey as more of just, I mean, it's you've heard this, right? Like you know the stance is that he's a bit player. He gets these design targets, and that's why his per route numbers are really good. But I even wonder if he might lose some of that because is he better at that than Jalen Waddle? I don't really know. They have now a number of guys, whether it's him or Mims or Waddle, that could be used in that way. Or even Justin Jolie, who they just drafted at tight end, like, I mean, he's probably better at that than a tight end, but that guy is really good with the ball in his hands, like, and they drafted him. I'm nervous on Harvey. I'm low. I'm curious though where you're at. So I'm going to pull my running back rankings. He's ridiculously low. I'll try to find a spot. I mean, do you know off the top, like, are you drafting Harvey ahead of like the Pittsburgh backs? Let's just use that as a segue to talk about Mike McCarthy, who's on our B tier here. Are you drafting him ahead of Warren and Dowdle?
Yeah, I am.
Wow. Okay. So I'm much, much lower. Over the Washington backs, over Kyle Monangai, over Ramondre Stevenson, Jadarian Price.
Monangai, yes. Krosky Merritt, yes. Rashad White, maybe no. Probably pretty close there. Stevenson, no. Did I miss anyone?
Jadarian Price.
Jadarian Price, I'll take Price. But I will say, like, I'm pretty high, I would say, compared to ADP, just off of those handful of names that I just mentioned.
That's a lot of optimism, but I think it's fair. I think he could get better as a runner. I think the offense is probably going to be good, and the receiving role might be there in a big way. That's interesting. I do think, I don't love it when there's like, I do think it would take multiple injuries. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm overrating Jonah Coleman. Maybe he won't matter, but he just seems to have, I mean, it's possible, sure, but like we haven't seen it, but he does seem to have the mentality. They did draft him. It does feel like he's somebody who will get on the field right away. We'll see. The other guys here in this B tier that we haven't talked about are Andy Reid and Mike McCarthy. So just real quick on Reid, I wanted to point anybody who's curious. Here's a Jadarian Price profile, by the way, to this Kenneth Walker profile, because I think there's some really, really interesting stuff here on Eric Bieniemy and how the golden era of the Andy Reid run game has come under Eric Bieniemy. And then we saw really a transformation from DeAndre Swift last year with Bieniemy in Chicago. And that was not the first time DeAndre Swift had worked with Ben Johnson. It was the first time he had worked with Bieniemy, and he looked completely different than we ever seen him before in his career. I'm curious what he could do for Kenneth Walker. That's really the only take I have on the Chiefs. I would love it if they would go more under center, but they didn't add any tight ends to do that, so I don't think they have the personnel for it. So I think it's basically the same Chiefs as usual, except now they actually have a threat in the run game for explosive plays. Do you have anything on Reid? You want to talk about McCarthy?
Not particularly. I was like trying to develop an Andy Reid take in terms of he is in like the far right of all the design target graphs. Like he does that the most. I wanted to develop a take in terms of, maybe this is like how Ken Walker gets involved in the passing game, but I just couldn't really like write myself an argument that I was in love with. So yeah, I don't know. I'm perplexed on Ken Walker, just because I was so obnoxiously and out over my skis in on him last year. For anyone that's not aware, it was a really frustrating season. I felt vindicated, obviously, in the playoffs, just when he had the full-time role and would have broken fantasy football if that were the regular season. Goes to a place where he should by all, I'm not willing to entertain any arguments that any other Chiefs running back is going to drastically cut into Walker's role, but they also kind of use Rashee Rice as like an extension of the run game. So I don't know that the like total running back target pie is like that high. It should be like a decently strong offense with Patrick Mahomes. Like I want to buy into Ken Walker next to Patrick Mahomes in a full-time role. Like that, just zooming out, that sounds like something I should be interested in. But there's just so many good running backs in the like around the 1-2 turn and into round 1 and 2. Walker like has a little bit more injury risk than most of those guys on average too, probably. Like I don't know. I feel like I should be in on Ken Walker. I guess I'm just like bitter that there's 0 discount after last year because I think he's a really good player.
I know. If it wasn't for the Super Bowl run, I think we would be getting one, but we're not really. I'm basically where you're at with it. Although I do wonder if it's the inverse, where like Walker being out of the equation means less of the Rashee Rice stuff that's getting spammed all of the freaking time. I just wonder if they don't have to do that quite as much. Talk to me about Mike McCarthy, because I've got somebody at my door here, so I'm going to mute myself. Talk to me about Mike McCarthy.
All right. Mike McCarthy is just the most like B tier average type of play. Or did I put him in B or C? He's just the most average type of freaking play caller ever. The way that I put this in my article is like there's probably something to the fact that McCarthy, long tenured in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, has him for all these years. The moment he leaves, Aaron Rodgers wins back-to-back MVPs under Matt LaFleur, right? He's like never going to do anything particularly special, but he also probably just won't embarrass your offense. It will always be at least mediocre, maybe somewhere up into good. It just has never really been amazing. For fantasy, maybe we should be a little more bullish than that implies, just because going from Arthur Smith, just like the most run-heavy offense ever, to McCarthy, who has always been at least average or sometimes well above average in terms of pace, in terms of dropbacks per game, pass heaviness. That could be like a little bit of a surprise, I think, to people in terms of how much the Steelers and even 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers end up dropping back. How you take advantage of that in fantasy, I think I'm down to just Michael Pittman, basically, and even that might just be way more of like a best ball type of take. He's cheap in managed redraft, and that can be a way to kind of backfill a wide receiver room if you go RB heavy early on. But yeah, I think Pittman makes sense as just like an intermediate area of the field target for Rodgers. We've seen Pittman actually command a lot of targets in 11 personnel when he's had to compete against guys like Josh Downs, Tyler Warren. So I'm like pretty optimistic on Pittman. I think him and Metcalf should be projected for basically the same number of fantasy points this year. There's been a gap in ADP between them all offseason that I've never really understood. And I guess the other thing I'll mention is specifically in the red zone, Mike McCarthy has also always been very pass heavy. Aaron Rodgers has been most of the time other than when he's played for Arthur Smith. So I do think between Metcalf and Pittman, one of these guys could have like a surprise double-digit touchdown type of season and get into like the fantasy wide receiver 2 range just off of that. Pittman's still my favorite bet, but yeah, Metcalf could totally just do that and own me as a nerd from that angle as well. So that's just kind of where I'm at on the Steelers. The inverse of this is that we're going from one of the most, at least highest volume, most valuable backfields with Arthur Smith in total to like just a very average type of backfield setup. McCarthy's backfields have been worth about 3 fewer expected fantasy points per game than Smith's in total over the past 5 seasons. I really like Jaylen Warren. He's been a player that I've been a fan of and have boosted in the past. I just don't know that we can project anything between him and Rico Dowdle. Both of them could convincingly play in any given phase. There's not like a game script angle here. Dowdle has at times been very productive in a bell cow role, but it also took until the end of 2024 when he was playing under McCarthy to actually get into a legitimately high volume role with super washed Ezekiel Elliott as the primary competition. And even still, Dowdle wasn't really handed the starting gig until Elliott, I think he missed a meeting or something. There was like a disciplinary reason that he had to sit out of a game. And that was where Like the fire got lit and Dowdle had a great like final 5 or 6 games of the year. So I just don't know, outside of like a catalyzing event, which is really probably just an injury of either Warren or Dowdle, I don't see like a reason to prefer one over the other. And I also don't see a reason to think that they can both be super fantasy relevant, kind of like Warren and Gainwell were last year, just because I don't expect this to be like as running back friendly an offense as we had with Arthur Smith.
Yep. I think that sums it up well. I think they're fine if you like totally struck out at running back. You tried to go kind of cute at running back and cheap with your RB 2-3 spots or whatever. Because I do think if either one does get hurt, the other one will probably be pretty valuable. And I also think that either one of them could get hurt because they do both run like superheroes. So that's a realistic possibility. We've seen them both get a little bit dinged up. I wanted to your Pittman point, again, point towards this episode, the 12 receivers who can win versus any coverage. So I mentioned that Josh Downs was in it. Other than him, it's like the best freaking guys in the league. I was pretty strict with the thresholds they needed to hit against man, zone, and press coverage according to reception perceptions charting is how I like started this in terms of whittling it down to 12 guys. And Pittman showed up like just on the periphery of this discussion. He was like very close to being one of the guys who hit the thresholds for all 3 coverage types, which I do think is interesting. I think it's a real chance that he can just be just kind of the target vacuum there, like kind of the wide receiver 1 and potentially score a lot of touchdowns. So he would be my bet if I had to place a bet on the Steelers. Dan really likes the fit here with Mike McCarthy. He thinks that it's going to be for the passing volume, for the passing game pieces, a big turnaround from what we've seen in the past. So I think he would even be like kind of in on Metcalf at the right price, even though a lot of things about last year's production for Metcalf suggest that he was fluky and everything. Okay, I wanted to get in the McCarthy discussion real quick because we do have him in the B tier. We already talked about, we didn't talk about Declan Doyle much. Do you have anything to add on Doyle? Because him and Sean Mannion and Webb were the 3 that you and I would place in the B tier, with like an optimistic case that maybe they can be more than we know. Really, we've got a pretty big group here. I'm going to throw the names up on the screen. Let me know if this looks out of order to you. We're just guessing, but the order I put them in terms of my optimism is Declan Doyle, Davis Webb, Sean Mannion, Brad Idzik taking over in Carolina. Has been there for a while though. David Blau in Washington. I'm liking a lot of the stuff David Blau is saying, so you could push him higher if you want. I mean, we're one evil genius quote away from him being near the top of this list probably. And then Brian Fleury is last, but that's just because I don't know a single thing about freaking Brian Fleury. If you want to educate me, that'd be great.
If I were to rank them, I would put Blau ahead of Idzik. I know a little about Fleury. We know basically nothing about Idzik. There's like very little actionable in terms of his quotes. So I can just kind of quickly start from the bottom and give an overview. Cool. Brian Fleury, the biggest thing with him, 2 big things with him. One is a lot of his quotes are like, yeah, we're going to run the same offense. It's going to look exactly the same as the one that just won the Super Bowl, which like I don't blame the guy for, but also I kind of want in my play caller, I want a guy that's really confident in himself, has a chip on his shoulder, has things that he wants to brag about to the media in terms of, I am going to one up Klint Kubiak. That is me. I am that guy. That hasn't been Fleury at all. Maybe that's unfair of me. I've never met the guy to make a personality judgment like that, but it reminds me a little bit of how Kevin Patullo sounded last year coming off of the Eagles Super Bowl win in terms of not changing the offense. So that might just like not be fair at all. But as I was like writing and reading and researching for this piece, I was like, oh man, that's like sounds like scarily familiar. So maybe that's ridiculous. When it comes to like the football angle and what I think he'll actually do on the field, Fleury, we have a few reasons to think could increase the rate of motion at the snap for the Seahawks, which would be notable because it was pretty low for most of last season. That didn't actually give an efficiency boost to Jackson Smith and Jigba or to any of the Seahawks really. So it's a little like unclear to me who benefits from that, if anybody. And with Fleury, it's really just going to be incredibly hard to follow up the performance that Kubiak just had. Like the downfield play action efficiency was absurd. It was quite important for Jackson Smith-Njigba's fantasy output. Including like Sam Darnold playing out of his mind, has the best highly accurate throw rate on attempts of 20 plus downfield out of 149 qualifying quarterback seasons over the past 5 years. Like, just I see regression with a lot of that. Basically, I'm a little nervous about JSN for that reason. Just as a top 5 pick, saying like he's gonna massively overperform his efficiency again. We do have from Fleury that he wants to stay very run heavy in the red zone, or at least he thinks that an effective goal line offense comes through the run. And that's like not great for passing touchdown volume necessarily, especially if the big long touchdowns go away or aren't as like absurdly high rate there as they were last year. So I'm a little worried there. Not really Fleury's fault, more of just like anybody is going to have a hard time following this up. Idzik, we know basically nothing. It sounds like it's the exact same offense, but Canales just needs like more mental bandwidth on game days. So I don't really expect much to change for the Panthers. David Blau, interesting, saying all the right things, wants to get under center more, wants to use play action more, wants to give 10 targets a game to Terry McLaurin. All that's very intriguing. My one concern is that I think Dan Quinn is way too involved here, or like is at least going to try to meddle somewhat. It seems like Cliff Kingsbury got fired because Dan Quinn wanted him to run more and play at a slower pace to help out the defense. And that actually was kind of the case last year. Kingsbury's pace of play was not as high as we'd seen before. I just wonder like how much can Dan Quinn kind of come in and ruin this with David Blau, but like in theory, I'm optimistic on him. Getting up to Mannion, he also has been saying all the right things in terms of under center. He wants to have Jalen Hurts throw over the middle of the field more. And as you have up on screen, all the players, Jordan Mailata, are just putting amazing praise on him. Did not put amazing praise on Kevin Patullo, did on Kellen Moore. So there's like a track record here of Jordan Mailata accurately predicting how well these Eagles play callers would perform. And that's great for Mannion on that angle. But yeah, from a football angle, I'm just like really in on the Eagles passing game. I think there's a very good chance this actually works. Hurts, while he's not thrown over the field very much, has been one of the most efficient quarterbacks over the middle of the field. He ranks like middle of the pack in throws to open and wide open receivers over the middle of the field. So I don't think it's a selection bias thing. I think it's not just, oh, he only throws there when it's wide open. That's not what the data says at all. I think there's a really good chance that this Eagles passing game is just way more efficient than anyone expects. And I'm excited about Hurts, about Devontae Smith, about Dallas Goedert for those reasons. So yeah, generally positive on Mannion. Doyle's pretty simple. It's just we hope he's going to run more play action than Monken did last year. Not that that's Monken's fault necessarily. It may have just been Lamar Jackson being injured, but if he does that, I think we see just like a return to the Lamar Jackson league high efficiency that we've become accustomed to. And then, yeah, Davis Webb. Biggest thing with him is I think it will be a very similar like Sean Payton style offense. Of course, Payton's still going to be involved. Just the biggest thing with Webb is that he is capable of getting the play call in faster. This has been a thing Bo Nix has like publicly complained about, or not publicly like in front of a podium, but on the field, like yelling at Sean Payton, come on, like get the call in. I want to get up to the line. I want to be in the hurry up. I want to lead the league in dropbacks again. And they think that having Webb be the one physically calling the plays can help facilitate that more. So that's like just a great idea for everyone involved from a fantasy angle. Just more plays for the Broncos would be great. And that's part of my RJ Harvey, Jalen Waddle optimism. So that was a quick speed run of all the new guys. Fantastic stuff.
And again, I've got the play callers 22,000 word article up on the screen. Y'all have to go check this out. What I've got here is Ryan's vibes rating for the new play callers. You see Bobby Sloak, Matt Nagy, Frank Wright, and Brian Daboll in the red tier, the negative tier. I think Dan has some cautious, optimistic, reasoning on Cam Ward and the fit with Daboll. Maybe he gets to run a little bit more. Is there anything you want to share on those four, or do you want to just talk about Mike LaFleur?
Yeah, let's just skip the negative guys, honestly. Shout out Dan. Shout out Dan though. He had a couple of great takes about some of these guys I had not thought about that I got to go research after and add to the article. Like Matt Nagy's tight end history was genuinely really interesting. I got to add that in because he had brought that up on a show we did together. So yeah, I should have cited him in the article in a couple points and I didn't, and I feel bad about that now. So if you're listening, Dan, thank you. You're awesome. Yeah, you're great.
Always shout out Dan. That guy rules. Mixed tier. We've already talked about Idzik. You got Drew Petzing here. Surprises me a little bit. Mike McCarthy, Brian Fleury, David Blau. The two that we haven't talked about are Tommy Rees and Kevin Stefanski with the Falcons, and then Mike LaFleur with the Cardinals. You can take either one of those. I haven't done a ton of digging into LaFleur just because I don't know. I just think there's no way to know what's going to happen with Arizona. And I think honestly you're probably best off just kind of avoiding the offense because there's like a lot of really good situations that you could draft from this year. But I'm too scared to take McBride at his price, but McBride exists and is going to be this massive volume vacuum. And so it's like, I don't know if any of the other ones can really be good enough to burn me if I don't take them. If McBride still exists and is getting 25% of the offense or whatever. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the Cardinals.
So the one guy I will try to talk you into from this angle is going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. And I'll be interested to hear your reaction to the case I'm about to lay out. So I think the conventional wisdom on the Cardinals right now, this is the take that Rich Rebar shared on the show a few weeks ago. Awesome show, by the way. Go listen to that. Loved that one. Reeves is the man. But I think like the conventional wisdom on the Cardinals is they've added all these running backs. They've added all of these guards in the draft and free agency. They probably want to be kind of more run heavy and like grind games out. And I think maybe that is their intention. But what we've seen in Mike LaFleur's history when he was OC of the New York Jets and he had semi-competent quarterback play, so literally just not Zach Wilson, 12 games with Mike White and Joe Flacco, LaFleur's Jets averaged over 300 passing yards per game. He had a top 6 pass rate over these 2 seasons, was top 6 in pace of play in these seasons. LaFleur actually will drop back a ton and play very fast if he thinks he needs to. If that's like the only way to stuff the box scores, we have just seen him do it and like create at least like fantasy viability for like extremely putrid Jets offenses. So that's something I just would have in the back of my mind when it comes to the Cardinals, where again, they are kind of running back this defense that was injured, but totally failed last year with the same defensive coordinator. One of the lowest win totals in the NFL, should be playing from behind a lot. There's a world where either Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew, probably not Carson Beck, it does legitimately get up there in drop back volume if LaFleur just kind of doesn't want to be a tank commander, wants to show some stuff on offense, even in negative game scripts. Like I think there's a world where this offense leans pass heavy just out of necessity. And if that's the case, then like Marvin Harrison Jr. is a really, really interesting ceiling breakout bet. One of the best wide receiver prospects of the past decade. It's going into year 3. This is when the most common season that we see wide receivers elevate their play and break out. And in 3 games last year with Jacoby Brissett, Marvin Harrison Jr. had a higher first read target share than Trey McBride did. He was up at 38% in that sample. That would have ranked top 5 at the position last year. So we do even have, just from a share perspective, a pretty damn good sample for Marvin Harrison Jr. Commanding a lot of targets, even next to Trey McBride. Like I think there's a world where this offense is a little more passive than we expect. Harrison comes out as legitimately the number 1 receiver, is getting targeted as much or more often than a Trey McBride, and he's just several rounds cheaper and is not really priced as if the Cardinals garbage time scam is going to continue. So if it even does like a little bit, then that's pretty exciting to me. For him, it's really just cost, and like there are a lot of middle round wide receivers I'm really into, so I don't know exactly how high I can rank him. I might get like way more of him on certain sites than others, depending on like the ordinal rank of some of these guys' ADPs, but he's someone I'm really paying attention to and that I'm interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is all fair. It is just a 3-game sample size. Like, I think it's interesting.
Fair.
Right. Like, what I dug into wasn't specific to the quarterback play necessarily, and that's relevant for sure because Kyler has affected him for all the reasons we talked about with over the field, middle of the field throws and stuff. But yeah, and it seemed like for the most part, McBride's stuff was just the same all year long, even when MHJ was on or off of the field. In terms of the shares, the percentages of the team's receiving yards and first read targets and all of that. I guess I view him similarly to Roma Odunze. It was interesting digging into the reception perception charting where Odunze just looks like a better version of him. And they are in this group of archetype of receivers who can like beat man coverage and potentially press coverage. Odunze had better press coverage rates than him, but do struggle a little bit against zone in terms of like hitting the necessary threshold to probably be a receiver who gets a large target share. It's tough to say if that's a skill issue for him because at Ohio State, we saw clearly that he was getting really high target rates. And, you know, whether it be Petzing's design or whatever, he's been kind of mostly stuck on the outside. So maybe with a different play designer, he gets to move around more. And when he's not so often forced into this kind of vertical role against some of the tougher cornerbacks and sometimes playing well hurt or whatever, maybe these success rates go up for zone, you know, and he can be kind of what we've envisioned here. I just feel better about a lot of he is probably cheaper than this profile should be on paper, but I don't see anything when I watch him that has me feeling overly convicted that he's a strong talent. I don't feel overly convicted about the play caller compared to any of these other guys. And I also am just nervous that the offense might be one of the absolute worst in the league. And so I'm just kind of not really clicking his name. But it wouldn't surprise me if he does have the year 3 breakout and he was way too cheap. You know, I can get behind that take. I think that makes sense. Do you have any love takes?
I think for him, it's just the ADP is too high for a rookie running back on a bad team with at least like nominal backfield competition. LaFleur did get Breece Hall going like pretty early in his career. Like by week 4, he was over 20 touches per game every single week, was using him in the passing game, like all the stuff we want. And I think Jeremiah Love is an awesome, amazing talent. But yeah, I guess like compared to an AJ Brown, a Drake London, like where you're going to have to draft him in the second half of round 2, I'm probably not like that in, but I see the case. I see like why people are into it, but yeah, it is just a little bit pricey for me, I think, relative to the other options.
Let me hit you with another insane ranking at the running back position. You thought the Jonathan Taylor one was bad. I have DeAndre Swift ahead of Jeremiah Love. That's going to age well.
Whoa! I mean, it might, but yeah, that might be the wildest running back ranking I've seen. Good for you having conviction there.
Good for me. Yeah, I feel good about it. People are going to love that one. All right, Ryan, this was awesome. Do you have anything on Atlanta you want to add before we get out of here? We've been talking for 2 hours, but I mean, people definitely need to know about Kyle Pitts and stuff. Do you have any Falcon stuff you want to add?
Not particularly. Tommy Rees is going to be the play caller for the Falcons. He took over Brown's play calling halfway through last season. The offense was largely the same as it was under Kevin Stefanski, which was not that great, but that's also not that surprising given the personnel. Reese has a long history of being like a tight end whisperer, got a ton of production out of Tommy Tremble, Michael Mayer, and of course Harold Fannin in his rookie season last year. So in theory, that's like great for Pitts, but also we're just drafting Pitts like way too high, in my opinion. We're just really drafting him off of that sample of games without Drake London, where if you look at whenever he played with London, he was like not fantasy viable practically. So I don't know. I'm just not. I don't think there's like a great takeaway from Reese or for Pitts or from any of those tendencies.
I will say I think Stefanski's offenses, and we'll see on Reese, but Stefanski's offenses have been pretty concentrated on like 1 or 2 players and the target distribution, a lot of play action stuff to kind of free up like 1 or 2 guys. So I think the fit is kind of seamless here with London and potentially Pitts. And then also, like you said, Reese has loved tight ends even dating back to college. So I get it. I get why people are high on Pitts. Also, some of the data checks out. I thought he looked the best he had on film. And then even like yards after contact, yards after the catch too, like all look pretty good for Pitts, both last year and then just over the entirety of his career. Like he could slide in here and be relevant even if he wasn't last year when London was on the field. I think that's possible with a different play designer, different play caller here. Okay. I think this has been great, Ryan. I feel a little bit bad, like just like rushing out the door and not talking about the new play callers on some of these teams. But when in reality, we did talk about every single one except for like 2 or 3. Like we did talk about Bobby Sloak and the Dolphins, but the show title is like draft good players from good teams, right? And so that why do I not have Jeremiah Love higher in my rankings is I just don't think it's a good team. I don't think the Falcons are going to be a good team. I don't know what's going to happen at quarterback there. I don't know what's going to happen with this coaching staff. They just kind of got pushed out of Cleveland. Like I don't know. I do know that the Bears are probably going to be pretty freaking good. I feel pretty confident in Ben Johnson, and that's why we started with the best play callers. That was really the whole purpose of this discussion. Draft good players from good teams. You can talk about it for 2 hours, or you can just probably, honestly, just make a list of the players from the S and A tier and draft those players, and you probably have a pretty freaking good team. I really think so. Maybe you and I should draft a team this year where we just do that. Thank you, Ryan. All of y'all follow Ryan. If you are not, go check out this freaking behemoth of an article. It's well worth your time. I'm really looking forward to digging into it more. FantasyPoints.com has all of the goods that you need. Go check out their YouTube channel. Let me find that. Can you plug that for us while I get it up on the screen?
Yeah, youtube.com/fantasy points. I'm on there every single Monday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern time, live with Graham Barfield. So that's something you guys can tune into. And then, yeah, we also have the separate DFS and best ball channels. I do a bunch of best ball content on there with Jacob Sanderson. That's a lot of fun. The other Jacob. And then, yeah, the Dynasty channel. I'm on Dynasty Points every week. I'm all over our YouTube stuff. So yeah, definitely go check that out. Go hit subscribe. That would help us out a ton. So yeah, thanks as always, Jacob. Had an awesome time. Love going over 2 hours with you. And yeah, it's excited to. Is our next show announced yet? Or can I tease that for tomorrow?
Yes, sir. Tease away.
Yeah.
I've got some teases, but go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to be on here live tomorrow with Matt Harmon, and he's going to roast a couple of us data nerds about the wide receiver position. So I'm really looking forward to that show. I don't know what Jacob has planned, but I know it's going to be a lot of fun.
For sure. Check out Beyond the Box Score if you have not. Do subscribe, please, and thank you. Got the Matt Harmon show coming up. If you want more crazy DeAndre Swift takes, I've got that league-winning running back show coming up with Theo Grimminger. So stay locked and loaded. We'll keep you exactly where you need to be. Draft good players, good teams for the 2026 draft season. Let's win some leagues.